Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to DCA Committee, Wednesday, 28th of April, our last DCA for this municipal year. I've just a few things to say before we move to the formal agenda for today's meeting. The formal legal standing of the meeting. This meeting is being held under government statutory instruments, Local Government England, the local authorities, coronavirus, flexibility of local authority meetings, England Regulations 2020. To take account of these regulations, Bristol City Council has produced a set of virtual meetings, procedure rules, and these are available on our website. This means that decisions made by the committee will have the same standing and validity as if they had been made at a meeting in City Hall. Members of the public who have submitted written public forum statements, I can confirm that your statements have been circulated to all the members of the committee prior to the meeting and will be taken account of when the decisions for each application are made. Some of you have requested to address the committee concerning your statement and have been provided with details on how to do so. You will be held in the waiting room for this meeting until it's time for you to address the committee, and you will then be invited in to do so. You will then have only 1 minute to speak. After you have finished speaking, you will be removed from the meeting, but will still be able to view it via the public broadcast on YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, could you please turn that off as you come into our Zoom meeting, please, so that we don't get the feedback. Members of the public, although you will see a number of different people on your screen during the course of the meeting, only myself and other councillors will make the decision on each application. Members of the committee, please ensure your sound is muted when you're not speaking. And when you finish speaking, can you please mute your sound again? I will invite each of you to speak by way of a queue system. So if you use the electronic hand, please, then in theory, I should be able to, one way or another, keep a record of what order you are speaking in. Please check your titles are okay so that members of the public are able to see who is who on their screen. Moving a vote. When moving a vote, would you please indicate as above with the hand that you wish to speak and wait until I ask you to speak. Please then clearly state what you're moving, particularly for the benefit of the public. The first vote for each application, according to our procedure, should be the officer recommendation. If you're seconding a motion, please again clearly indicate you wish to speak and wait for me to call you. This again is particularly for the benefit of the public. When voting, I will call each councillor by name according to the way that I see them on my screen. That's the only way that I've found that works for me. So if you're not on your screen the same way, don't worry about it. There is a logic to it. And please then just answer for, against, or abstain. This will ensure not only that the vote is accurately recorded, but it also enables members of the public then to clearly see how all councillors have voted. Any questions from councillors, or are you used to it after a year now? Good, thank you. I think we're all okay then. The agenda. Do we have any apologies for absence or substitutions, please?
Yes, Chair, we have 2 apologies and substitutions, or substitutions, I should say. Councillor Sultan Khan is substituting for Councillor Mark Wright, and Councillor Ollie Mead is substituting for Councillor Mike Davis.
Thank you. Councillor Mead is not here yet. For any councillor who's not present for the full presentation and questions and discussion is not able to participate in the vote. So hopefully Councillor Mead will make it in time to participate. Do we have any declarations of interest, please? I see no hands. Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Does anyone wish to raise anything regarding the minutes of the previous meeting which have been circulated to you? No? Thank you. We move now on to appeals. Gary, would you like to update us on the appeals that are currently being looked at? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the update this time will focus on a couple of cases, but it's the same site, which is items 45 and 46 in your papers, so pages 22 and 23. Because you'll know this committee has spent a lot of time and effort dealing with the Bedminster Green area of the city. You know, you've resolved to grant permission for 2 of the plots, plot 4 and plot 2. Plot 2 had also been the subject of an earlier appeal and public inquiry, an appeal that was dismissed. There's also a proposal on plot 3, which will come to a committee later on this year. And so the missing piece of the puzzle was something that you considered some time ago. And this is what's known as plot 1, but also known as the former Pring and St Hill site on Malago Road. Now, you determined the first application on this site way back in September 2019, refusing permission for the development, largely because of the height, scale and mass, a real cramped form of development, but also there was a technical reason in terms of flooding, and also the Environment Agency had lodged an objection in terms of lack of access to maintain the River Malago. Following that, the applicants had also submitted a revised scheme which had removed the general housing from the scheme, so that one was a 100% student accommodation scheme. Shortly after the statutory deadline passed, they appealed against non-determination. So we were looking at a combined process, looking at appeals against both refusals. The hearing was held early December, I think, and we'd been telling you that hearing had taken place, but the decisions had taken a while to come through. As you can see from the papers, though, it came through at the very start of this month, and I'm glad to say that both appeals were dismissed. The inspector obviously considered both schemes in a lot of detail and all the issues. And in the end, what led to them both being dismissed was the height, scale, mass, the cramped form of development, the poor kind of public realm associated with the developments as well. The inspector did feel that the Environment Agency would still have reasonable access to the river to maintain the scheme, so the inspector didn't dismiss the appeal on that ground, and also felt that the remaining drainage issues that our own internal colleagues had raised could be adequately covered by a condition. So reporting on those, it's quite nice to kind of bring that particular episode to a close by the end of the municipal year, really, Chair. So there's almost a complete picture on the applications that were kind of left pending. Obviously, what we'll await really is further contact from the developers as to what their next steps are. And obviously those will be applications for the future. So just to really focus on those for this time around, Chair, and happy to take any questions either on that, or I'll do my best to answer questions on any of the other appeals listed in your papers today.
Thank you, Gary, and our appreciation to all the officers who've worked. I know there's an enormous amount of work goes into appeals and presenting appeals, and congratulations for making our point so clearly to the inspector. Do we have any questions regarding appeals from anyone? Electronic hand, we have Stephen Clark.
Thanks, Chair. Gary, I just want to ask you about the this business of the statues on the plinth. It says that they're appealing against non-determination. Is that really right, that we didn't determine within the time?
That's correct, Chair. Members will be aware that a statue or a piece of art was put on the plinth for around 24 hours, wasn't it? The Jem Reid statue, believed referred to as a surge of power. So really, I want to confine myself to answering the procedural points around that, because obviously there's lots of issues around all of that. So applications were made around the time that that piece of art appeared on the plinth. The applications weren't progressed by us, basically, so therefore no decisions were made. The people behind the artwork have exercised their right to appeal against that lack of decision, and so that's now in the hands of the planning inspectorate to come to a view on those proposals.
Well, sorry if I can just come back once, Chair. Well, so that was a procedural mistake by us not to determine them within the time, was it?
It certainly wasn't a mistake. It was a conscious decision not to progress with those applications. I don't want to go into too much detail around that, but it's fair to say that the council has set up the History Commission around the statue, the plinth, and all of the wide-ranging issues around that, and therefore the consideration, the consultation of and consideration of one specific proposal would have run counter to that process. So that there was a conscious decision not to proceed with the processing of those applications.
Okay, thanks.
Any further questions on appeals? Okay, enforcement, anything to highlight, Gary?
Nothing more than just to highlight that 2 further notices have been served since the last time that the committee met.
Anybody got any questions? No? Excellent, thank you. Practice notes, Gary, we've got practice notes on our agenda, which is something I've encouraged, is that we just have a chance to highlight some of our planning policy documents as they are produced. And do you want to just mention roughly, give us a little bit of background to that, so that for members of the committee and members of the public as well?
Yes, Chair. So the committee will be familiar with all the sort of the suite of policies that you use to determine planning application. And lying beneath that are a number of practice notes which help us all in terms of how we apply those policies. We do refer to them where appropriate within the reports that you see. And so this is almost like a reintroduced item. We used to do this years ago, so we're going to do this from now on, really, to keep you posted on further practice notes that are coming forward. Ultimately, these are prepared, they're signed off by the Director Development Place in liaison with the relevant cabinet member, because they are a kind of a policy aspect. But this is just to update you on, first of all, on all of the existing notes that are there. Also to highlight, which is point 3, that the climate change and sustainability practice note was updated last year. I know there was a lot of reference to this in the Bath Road decision that you made a little while ago. And then most recently, the council has been doing some work in terms of residential space standards. And so that practice note has now been published and can now be applied in terms of planning decisions. So within that very short paper, there are a number of links to the page that includes them, but also the specific reference to the space standards and also the climate change practice notes. So hopefully members will get an opportunity to use those links and have a look at them. And as I said, really, as more practice notes either come forward or get refreshed, we'll continue to bring them to the committees for information.
Thanks. And it's good that we, members of the public, also are able to see that there is policy work going on all the time, a bit behind the scenes, trying to keep our policies up to date. And the local plan review coming up, isn't it? So members of the public also will be widely consulted as to future planning policy site allocations. Great. Well, we move on now to the items on our agenda. As is normal, I'm going to take the public forum comments on each item before each item. And so our first item today is the former railway depot, Clanage Road in Bristol. And I have a number of public forum statements. And the first public forum statement is Mr. Mark Ashdown, I believe. Mark, are you there? Please?
I am, Chair. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Lovely. Now, loud and clear. 1 minute, Mark, please. Thank you. Mark, you there? Thank you.
This is in respect of the former railway depot at Clanage Road, and my statement is being made on behalf of Bristol Tree Forum. Hopefully the committee has read our statement to the committee and has absorbed that. Just to say that you, the council, have declared climate and ecological emergencies, and the nature of an emergency is they require immediate action. And so our submission is that you should take that on board and when looking at this, and note that by the applicant's own admission, their planning application does not provide biodiversity net gain. In fact, there's a slight decrease in biodiversity net gain. And the point we've made is the Environment Bill, which is still going through the House of Commons, proposes that there be a 10% improvement on baseline biodiversity net gain, which this planning application does not achieve. I know that your planning officers will say that the bill is not yet an act of Parliament and therefore not binding on you, but our submission is that you should at least seek to achieve a minimum of 10% biodiversity net gain, which this proposal doesn't do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Next, we have Ronnie Popat, please.
Baseline biodiversity net gain, which this planning.
Hi, Ronnie. You have 1 minute, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Ronnie Popat. I am the Development Director of Vistry Partnerships here in Bristol. This project will deliver 220 new homes, of which almost 50% will be affordable for both social rent and shared ownership. We work closely with officers and have made revisions in the scheme in response to their comments. The revised scheme has been limited to 5 stories, which fits positively within the surrounding context and preserves the character and appearance of the area. The proposals incorporate key sustainability features, including a variety of public realm, amenity green space, ecological corridors, and an energy strategy, which is in excess of policy. This application will provide £39 million investment into the city and delivers the redevelopment of a long vacant brownfield site. We will be ready to be on site in the summer and hope that members will share our view that this scheme delivers a great opportunity for the city, and hope you'll approve this planning application today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next, we have Charlotte Taylor-Drake.
Hi there.
Hello. You have 1 minute, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today in support of this application. So before the debate, I just wish to highlight 2 key aspects of the scheme. Firstly, the design. We've worked rigorously with officers to formulate a design which optimises this long vacant brownfield site while responding sensitively to its gateway location. The scheme will deliver 220 much needed homes for the city, including 48% affordable housing. And the design accords with the recommendation of the Urban Living SPD, including a high quality material palette, space standard compliant dwellings with a high proportion that are dual aspect, a green and functional public realm, including 2 areas of play space and 185 new trees, and a layout which opens up the site to allow permeability and connectivity for the public. Secondly, the Festival Way route. we've worked collaboratively with officers to reach an acceptable solution that allows for the cycle route to be retained in its existing position, while also providing a dark ecological corridor along the western boundary of the site. Indeed, the proposals will make this route more attractive and vibrant through increased overlooking, tree planting, and more greenery. This is a high-quality scheme on a site with many technical challenges, and we're pleased that officers are recommending approval of the application. I hope that members agree and support the application too. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Wendy Tippett.
Hello.
Hi, Wendy. You have 1 minute, please.
Thank you. I'm from Avon Gardens Trust. Visible from numerous historic landscape assets of high value, these proposals will dilute the unique quality of the wider area. Local landscape assets include Ashton Court Estate, Greville Smythe Park, and within the Cumberland Basin Scheme, Bower Ashton Neighbourhood Park, Ashton Meadows, and the Wooded Hill. The setting to all of the above will be negatively impacted and harmed by virtue of the impact on views, as the proposals compromise the flow of green connectivity between the city, pastoral parkland, and woodlands. Separated by 260 years, two giants of the landscape profession were inspired by this locality. Humphrey Repton at Ashton Court frames views over to the city, while Sylvia Crow's Cumberland Basin Scheme celebrates views out to the parkland, woods, and the Avon Gorge. Avon Gardens Trust object to this current application. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I remind councillors that you should remain visible during the meeting, please? Thank you, Councillor Khan. Stephen Wickham.
Hello.
Hello, Stephen. You have 1 minute, please.
Okay, right. This application has seen an attrition process adopted by the applicant in seeking to exceed. Sorry, I've got to. Sorry. Sorry.
No problem. Carry on.
I'm so sorry about that.
No, we've all done it.
But it went wrong. We're still 50% above the original target and in a very poor place architecturally. The proposal still would not provide sufficient public benefit to outweigh the harm caused and consequently does not accord with the relevant local plan heritage policies and the requirements of the NPPF. We may now be in a position where Paxton Drive is being emulated in height, but the northern and easternmost blocks are far closer to the river than is Paxton Drive and directly border the City Docks Conservation Area, with the result that their impact on views is worse than Paxton Drive and the public perception of the rural fringe is deeply affected. Mr. Chairman, one of the unexpected gems of the Cumberland Basin system is the green landscape architecture put in train on the side of River Avon by Dame Sylvia Crow, perhaps Britain's most significant 20th century practitioner. After COVID, its true value as exercise space and destination has been revealed to potentially 50,000 people incumbent in the surrounding wards. For these reasons, I've drawn to your attention the four illustrations on my second page, which on camera like that.
Thank you. I think you're coming up to the end of your minute now, Stephen.
Indeed, yes. So that's view 3, view 1, view 4, and view 5, all of which are urbanised and harmed, meaning spoiled by or blocked by the proposals. Please refuse the application. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Rachel Sellers is our next public forum speaker. Rachel, are you there?
I am, thank you. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. 1 minute,
okay.
Please.
Thank you. I am a long-standing BS3 resident and also have had an allotment on the adjoining White City site for the last 31 years. I strongly object to the proposals and have filed a statement to that effect. I want to specifically highlight the following 3 points. First, there seems little dispute that the design quality is poor. Consultees reference it, and the officer's report seems to focus on it not doing material harm to the conservation area setting. However, I believe that the test is, does it preserve or enhance the conservation area? It clearly does not, and seems to be a very early sight of many people in relation to the views from Bristol to Ashton Court with the iconic suspension bridge beyond and vice versa. The design and the proposed scheme sets an appalling precedent, particularly in relation to any further development in this iconic and very sensitive part of Bristol. Second, I've had an allotment on White City, as I said, for 31 years. I do not believe that the intrusive shading as represented or referenced in the officer's report is the reality of what will occur, as a significant number of plots on the allotment site will be shaded for a large part or indeed the entire day during the autumn and winter. I'm extremely concerned in particular about the management of this site during construction if you decide to approve the scheme, and the possibility of the release of asbestos onto the vegetable plots that I and my fellow allotment holders tend to harvest produce from.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you very much. That comes to the end. That brings us to the end of the public forum statements, and I'm now going to hand over to Jess, I think, who's going to bring our officer report. You're on mute, Jess, I think. Jess?
Yes, sorry, I do apologise.
We've got you, you're with us, lovely.
Right, have you got the presentation?
Not yet. That's it, I think it's, yes, we are, lovely, thank you.
Right, okay, just one very quick comment before I start the presentation. I notice that I've referred to use class E and F2, which was an update on the description of development, actually because the application was submitted prior to the introduction of those use classes. It actually will still refer to use classes A1 to A5 and D, but it's, you know, they're a mixture of commercial or community uses. Right, you bear with me.
Yeah, it is. It's on a timeline.
I'm sorry, I do beg your pardon. I can't get my presentation to move. Oh yes, I have. Yeah, right. So Ashton Sidings, former, as I say, railway land, and that's the location of it. And you can see where the red line goes as far as Ashton Underpass, which will show where the axis is. The sidings were purchased by Homes England back 2013, and I've got just a few photos of the site taken at the end of last year and earlier this week. And as you can see, it's largely cleared, most recently used for a stonemason's yard, but been vacant for some time since then. As set out in the report 2014, the City Council were involved in the preparation of a planning concept statement for a residential-led development of this site, and it was subsequently allocated for housing in the draft local plan, which was considered in 2019. But as we know, that wasn't hasn't gone through to adoption, but that's still a material consideration. So I think what I would say is we can see no reason to object to the principle of residential development. And this one shows Paxton Drive to the east of the site. Right, as far as the development is concerned, the actual layout of the scheme is somewhat determined by the access point, the vehicular access point. Now that's something that has been the subject of considerable discussion since a residential development was being considered. And initially in the concept statement, they were looking at taking the access through to the Jessup Underpass and across the railway bridge. As we know, that's the Metro bus line, and then that comes through. Other potential alternatives, the narrow lane onto Clanage Road, but that's too narrow. Also, the railway bridge is not very strong at that point, wouldn't cope. The route through Paxton Drive is private and adopted, and therefore, after a lot of discussion, it was generally taken that the access would be from Ashton Underpass. I'm trying to see if I can get the big pardon. this is going very slowly. I do have a shot of the access. Anyway, the actual access point, which is something which some objectors actually have referred to, and with the transport statement that included figures of predicted peak time travel, which is about 55 an hour, and also did some modelling of the junctions in the vicinity. I do beg your pardon. In the vicinity of the proposed access, and the general consensus is with proper design that is suitable, though recognising that it will be quite a convoluted route depending on which direction you're coming from to get round and back into the system. The actual design of that access has been amended since the I'm just going to have another go. Sorry about this, folks. It's not functioning quite as it should. Shall I stop sharing and try again? Bear with me. Right. Can you now see? Right. Can somebody tell me if they can now see the shot showing the access?
No.
No. Right, I think we're in business now. Right, that's the access point.
Oh, there we are.
Yep. And so, as I say, there have been adjustments to that access, to the design during the course of the application. And it's now designed in a way that will allow maximum visibility to people leaving, entering the site, but also for other users of the road network. And as they say, there's adjustment there for pedestrian crossovers with the central reservation and dropped curbs. Now, one other key aspect of the site which has been referred to is the Festival Way sort of shared use path that currently runs along the western boundary of the site. Now that's permitted under licence at the moment, and the actual development proposes bringing that into the site and cutting through. So we're happy with the location, but as you will see from comments received, and particularly from our highway colleagues, very concerned about the width of that access. And because in last year, the Department of Transport issued a design notice, design guidance, to say that sort of shared use paths, i.e. pedestrians and cyclists, should be up to a 5 metre width. Now, this site, this is complicated on this site because of the ecological issues. Now, the actual site, an ecological survey was undertaken, evidently. We've got open mosaic habitats, but also there was a bat survey undertaken on the site. And from that, it was found that there are evidence of bats foraging and commuting across that side, to include the lesser horseshoe bats, who are particularly sensitive to light. And as mentioned by the agent, one aspect of the site is to provide a sort of bat corridor, an ecological corridor, and along the western boundary. Now, that as proposed is 6 metres wide, and that has potential to be acceptable provided light levels are low, and that would need low level light along the cycleway or the shared use path, and also within there. So what we've had Lux contour diagrams to actually illustrate that it does achieve that. Now, the other side of the proposed cycleway, stop calling it a cycle, shared use path, is a sort of like a landscape bund with trees. But as it stands, the cycleway is only 3 metres wide. As it exits the site and goes to the north. As I say, we've had objections on that basis, and it has been suggested that the bund of trees go, that they be pulled back. However, the trees do provide some greenery and add to the landscape and the visual, the amenity of that site. And to take them away, I think would be detrimental to the appearance. I know that there have been issues expressed about them providing a barrier, visual barrier, and creating some issues to do with personal safety of the use of the cycle path. I think I would say that if it were trees with very low level greenery between them, that would not necessarily be the case. And I would just, maybe the people are familiar with the situation with the Bristol Bath path that runs alongside the road near fish ponds. And it would be a similar situation, and a reasonably well used road does provide good levels of intervisibility on there. So, as I say, we would recommend that the proposed path stays as is, albeit, as I say, less than the 5 metres that's been recommended, taking into account our responsibilities, particularly in respect of protected species, and as I say, the route to the north. This may mean that it might not be adopted, particularly if low-level lighting is along there, because I understand that the colleagues dealing with adoption would prefer far higher levels of lighting, but we could secure the path and its maintenance through the planning application. So those two aspects help frame the layout. And as has been mentioned, what we have is blocks facing on to a central shared space, which will have limited passage of vehicles around it. So creating a better environment, overlooking and ease of access for future residents. Right. And I just had actually, I mentioned the issues of ecology on the site. Before we move on from this site, I will also point out that the slide we've got up is the proposed roof plan. And as far as, Mark's referred to the biodiversity net gain and that being an issue, to help address that, there are proposed brown roofs on those 5 blocks that you can see along the eastern boundary and the northern boundary, and they will help, recompense for the environment, the biodiversity environment that is to be lost. And also within the landscaped areas, there will be areas of replacement, sort of open mosaic habitat, but also hedges and other open spaces and wildlife planting. And although, as has been mentioned, it does fall slightly below a balance as far as net gain is concerned, that's 0.2%. The report that we've received from the ecologist is that, there is scope to improve that. And we will be looking to secure a fully detailed landscaping plan as part of any approval, plus the management and maintenance scheme. Right. Now, to turn then to the visual impact of the scheme, and this is something again that members of the public have referred to, as well as other interest groups, and it's something that we've concentrated on during the life of the application to try and render it, the height, the scale of it, to a point where we can recommend approval. Excuse me. Now, and bearing, one of the key reasons, as has been mentioned, is it's the position of the site. You have the bonded warehouses to the east, you've got Ashton Court Mansion and the estate to the northwest, and then you've got to the north the City Docks Conservation Area, you've got the Bar Ashton Conservation Area across to the southwest, and also you've got the locally listed Gravel Smart Garden. Now, again, I'm struggling with this again. I've got, right. This slide shows the heights of the development as now proposed, and as you'll see along the western edge, it's 3 stories, and then we have 2 5-story.
Sorry, Jess, I don't think we can see anything at the moment.
Oh no.
Might need to get to that slide and then reshare. Thank you.
Apologies. Can you see that now?
We can see that fine, thank you.
Yeah. Right. So that, as I say, shows the height of the blocks as we have now. So as I just repeat myself, the 3 along the western edge are 3 stories. Then you've got 5 stories as you come round north to the west. And then, although block A is 4 stories, though there is a slight increase because of the change in levels. Right, and I have included 1 or 2 of the visual impact illustrations that came with the application, though you may well have looked through them yourself. And I've taken 2 from Ashton Court, and these are they. And you'll see in the top left-hand corner is where the viewpoint was taken for. We've had 19 in total of visual impact drawings. So that's taken from a slightly higher level within Ashton Court, and as you will see, it will be visible, but sets down below the landscape and does not compete with the bonded warehouses. And this is one from slightly further down. Okay, during the time of year when the trees are in leaf, but again, you will see that what mostly you'll see is actually the college peeping through the trees there. So it will be visible, but it's not as intrusive, and as again, doesn't compete with the bonded warehouses. And one more, and again, looking out, and that's it there, sitting there. And in case people wanted to see, just to remind you, this is what is predicted to appear from the suspension bridge. So that's it. So it would be seen against Paxton Drive. Now, as has been mentioned as well, there's undoubtedly there will be points where it will be visible, and unavoidably so. And an assessment's got to be made as to whether or not that is acceptable. And I've included 3 of possibly the worst case scenarios just to give a complete picture. And this is from Clanage Road, where it will be, I think, at its most visible. So that's it there, but still with the bonded warehouses above that. This one is the one I think Mr. Wickham showed, and this is from near the bonded warehouse, near where the Riverside Garden Centre is, looking out across to where Ashton Court is. And again, that will take away some of the view of Ashton Court, but you will still see the green hill behind it, the estate. And last but not least, this is the one from looking towards the towpath, looking south. And again, you can see Paxton Drive there. And I haven't got the right one with there. I beg your pardon. Right, if we go on there to appearance, and this is something that, although I think Historic England have taken the view that the scale is now acceptable, and they particularly referred to the views out from Ashton Court, because initially they had been very concerned that the indivisibility between the estate and St Mary Redcliffe would be affected. They have not, but they are still concerned about the actual design approach. And I've just got a few slides now to show, taken from the design and access statement to basically show the design approach that's being looked at. Quite a modern approach, brick-clad balconies, and that's another one. So that's, I mean, as far as the, as I say, the agent has made it quite clear that they stand by the design approach. They feel it's a modern response to this part of the city, and our colleagues from the design team have suggested that some more verticality be introduced, to maybe some recessive panels, into the front, particularly of those 3 blocks facing onto the Metro bus route. But as I say, the developer stands by the approach taken, and this is what we will see. As far as the internal layout is concerned, they have provided an assessment against the Urban Living SBD. All units do comply with space standards. There are, I think, about 30% single aspect, but nearly all of those have significant balconies. You'll see those. And also we've got up to 12% wheelchair fully accessible units, which I think there was a late comment about that. And just to clarify that situation, it's the optional fully wheelchair layout that we've got 12%. They will, of course, all have to comply with category 1 of Part M for to comply with building regs. But as I say, quite a few units do go beyond that. And then I'll just finish off if I may. Again, comments from residents of Paxton Drive, obviously concerned about the change in their outlook and potential issues to do with light. And I think this is possibly the best illustration to show the relationship between the two. Undoubtedly, they will be looking out onto something quite different. The shortest distance between the blocks is 27 metres. There is the bus running in between. The actual relationship between those blocks is similar, if not better, than the internal relationship within Paxton Drive. And in this sort of development, we feel, is acceptable. And so I'll just finish off by saying recommendation. We're recommending approval, subject to a 6 agreement, which will cover the affordable housing element, various traffic regulation orders, traffic plan management and audit fee, and fire hydrants. And we'd like to ask for delegated authority to draft and agree the conditions, although they're largely drafted, but we haven't finalised them as yet. So thank you.
Thank you, Jess. We move on to questions now. I've got a very quick one. Did you, and I'll begin then, Chair's prerogative. Did you suggest that the biodiversity net gain figure might be improved upon during the reserved matters process?
I think the letter that we've had from the ecologist who's been acting on behalf of them is quite honest about the small shortfall, but is of the view that with some more meadow planting within the open areas around site, that could be addressed. And as I say, what we've got at the moment is a sort of landscape strategy, which with an indicative landscape plan, and we will need that fully detailed up, and we would ask for that by condition. And I don't see any harm if that were in also asking for an updated net gain assessment to come in with that.
Thank you. So Councillor Steve Smith, followed by Councillor Stephen Clark.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Jess. Two quick questions. First one, I understand, if I've read the report right, the heat strategy in here is central gas boiler, but capable of being converted to was it a ground source heat pump at some point in the future?
At some point, but also very much designed in a way that it could easily link into the heat network as when it gets to that
if
point.
it comes to the area. Okay. So my question is, if it could be converted to a heat pump, why isn't there a heat pump proposed now? And should it not have that in order to comply with BCS 14 and the hierarchy?
We could ask the question, as I say, it has, what's being proposed is the gas pump. My colleague in Sustainable Cities, on the basis that it can easily be converted to join into the heat network, they've accepted that. There will be, I think, as you saw from the roof plan that I showed earlier, there will be quite a number of PV panels across the site as well to contribute power from renewables. As I say, that's what we have in front of us at the moment.
Okay, my question really was just about my simple understanding of BCS 14 is there's a hierarchy, and essentially you should pick the greenest option you can. And it seems to me that if a heat pump could go in here, then that should be what's selected in order to comply, rather than gas. If you've got, gas would only be acceptable if you don't have a choice, is what I thought the policy said.
I mean, in the fact it's a centralised power heat plant, and I think that's sort of key. In as far as actually how that's powered, we could raise that with them. I mean, as I say, if people were minded to recommend approval and wanted us to further pursue certain aspects of it, then we can always do that and come back and report back in some fashion at a later date.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is picking up on the issue of shading. There's a few concerns raised, particularly around the allotments, actually. I know the report says quite categorically they're not affected, but a lot of people have said they are affected. Can you just pick up on what evidence there is one way or the other?
As far as the shadow, if you look at the orientation between the blocks and the allotments, they're due east of them, so any shading will be limited to morning. But they're also a distance from there, and you will have a line of trees there anyway. It will be very limited as far as that side is concerned. If there is going to be shadow falls, possibly more towards Paxton Drive, because that's to the west. So as the sun comes round, there'll be some morning shadow fall from the buildings towards the allotments, but it won't be. It'll be mid-late morning, and that'll be completely past there.
And have we done, or have the applicant done? I don't know what the proper name is for them, but we see these studies where you get a picture of where the shadow would be at certain times of the day or different times of the year.
We have got those. Possibly should have included those in the.
Okay, that's fine, but they exist and they've been done as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen Clark.
First point, I agree with Councillor Smith about the boiler that should be put in. It's a bit strange that actually there's a gas boiler. But my main point is, we're told there's 81 dwellings per hectare. Can you put that into context, please? I mean, I kind of know what that means, but is that the right concentration for that area? I mean, we're sort of on the edge of the city, aren't we? But we're still in the city.
If you look at, and I did mean to make reference to this, if you look at the policies in the core strategy in respect of density of development, it does actually fall within an area where high density development is recommended. And it's actually 81 per hectare is similar to, I think there's a photo with policy BCS 20, and it's a sort of, I suppose, think Windmill Hill about that density. Interestingly, from the information I found, was that actually Paxton Drive is 135 dwellings per hectare. But I don't know, again, that might depend on the size of the dwelling. There might be a lot more smaller units within there. But no, it is actually, yeah, given the accessibility towards the city centre, it does fall within a high density development.
I think Wapping Wharf is about 220, 230 from memory.
Yeah, so that puts it into perspective, doesn't it?
You're not concerned then, the fact that this is, I would call, relatively low density, really? You're not concerned about that?
Well, it provides a good quality environment with a large shared use space. 81 seems to be, as I say, it's towards the edge of the city. It's not something that I've got concerns about.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Fabian.
Thank you, Chair. First, a quick question. The proposed cycleway shared use path is 3 metres wide. How wide is the existing one, please?
I believe it's 3.
Okay. Another thing I noticed that this pathway is separated from the road access to the car parking spaces for the flats by a line of trees. Had anyone thought of maybe pushing the trees up against the reserve area, the sort of back reserve, having that as a shared space, okay, with a very low speed limit, but it's only access to and from the car park. That could have then been a much wider, at least for a chunk of it, shared path, almost certainly safer for any users after dark. Was that considered?
I think the idea was that there would be a separate, segregated pedestrian cycling facility rather than a totally shared use facility with the road that will take the bulk of the vehicular traffic. I mean, Highways did suggest pushing that bund of trees back, and by doing so, that would make that path a little wider. I don't think you'd reach the full 5 metres. Now, I think the one disadvantage of that would be visual, and also you would end up with a very wide, hard surfaced strip down there rather than one that's sort of broken by trees. I don't know whether, Steve, you want to say anything about whether or not you think a totally shared use surface down that edge would work.
Well, to be frank, the answer is no, I'm afraid. I think it needs to be taken into consideration that this is a national cycle route as well as being a shared route for pedestrians as well. The route is from Seaton to Bristol. This is of strategic importance. It's not just extensively used by cyclists who are commuting from North Somerset, but you've also got a significant number of pedestrians that are walking through to Ashton Court, even Ashton Court Estate, and also you've got the UE Bower Ashton, the art campus. Our concern is that you could have significant pedestrian cycle conflict. It's particularly busy at weekend where you've got a lot of leisure users, and no data is actually being submitted as to the specific numbers of people that are using this route. I mean, in terms of the cycle guidance, I mean, that is something that specifically came from the Department of Transport in reference to the current pandemic and the need to provide as much room for pedestrians and cyclists as possible. And I understand the importance of the ecological emergency, but there's also a climate emergency, and we're not going to encourage people out of their cars to walk or cycle if we don't provide high quality infrastructure. And considering that this is a brand new site, I don't understand why they cannot provide I understand the need for the back corridor, but surely there should be capacity to provide that 5-meter corridor from the start. This is what we are looking for, full segregation now for all routes where the space is possible, and this is something that's specifically referenced in this local transport.
So, Stephen, pardon me interrupting. So you're not happy with the 3-meter route width on offer?
No, I'm afraid not.
Thank you for that.
Fihans?
Hello. Couple of questions. One relating back to the heat pump question. Were we minded to approve this? Could we condition the heat pumps just as a check? Would that be a possibility, do we think?
I think it's something that we could go back and talk to them about and ask. I mean, because as well as ground source heat pumps, I know there are 1 or 2 centralised, power heat pumps that have been put forward with quite substantial air source heat pumps as well. So
okay, so that's not quite the same as conditioning, though, is it? So the strongest you could do is go back and talk to them very firmly.
I suppose we could.
My suggestion is we could perhaps put a condition on requesting a strategy in terms of the heating of the site. Obviously, there'll be a phased development, and I guess we could, I think what we've heard so far from the committee, I haven't heard from everyone yet, but the message is fairly clear from the committee. The developers will be aware of what the expectation is, and we could utilise that in saying, well, in terms of satisfactorily discharging that condition, that strategy needs to be suitably ambitious but deliverable.
Okay. Suitably ambitious. We like that phrase. Thank you, Gary. And the other question is relating about what Stephen Wickham was saying about legislation that has yet to be passed, central legislation. As I understand it, we've passed a number of motions in the council which have yet to have any. So it's 2 parts to this question. I'm being a bit incoherent. Number 1, there's national legislation which hasn't been passed yet. So my understanding is we can't actually pay any regard to it at this point. Otherwise, we're just going to get appealed successfully. Is that correct?
Yeah. And
okay.
The advice. Sorry.
And the second part is in a similar sort of vein. Whilst we may have passed climate emergency motions and ecological emergency motions and all the rest of it, none of this has yet to translate really into much planning legislation, local plan, because that's been held up. Am I correct in my interpretation? I just want to check what the status of these different bits are, so we can't. What I'm trying to say, the council's declarations have yet to filter through to planning policy yet, although they are in the pipeline. Similar kind of issue.
Yeah, I can answer that one.
I thought you might, Gary. Sorry, Jess, I wasn't trying to.
It's one of those, isn't it?
It's more of a Gary question.
Yes. So legally, yes. So we're waiting for the Environment Bill to become the Environment Act. So legally, yes, we would be on thin ice really if we were to say insist upon biodiversity net gain of 10%, which is what the law is going to bring in at some point in the future. So preparation is already being made for that, and there's a lot of joint working going on at the moment in terms of linking the biodiversity net gain requirement that will be forthcoming with the existing ecological emergency. Various action plans are being put together to actually combine those 2 things together. So the committee will be familiar at the pace that policy has to move through, because it all hangs off what's now the WECA SDS really. So before the local plan can become more ambitious, so there is that sequence of events to follow, and it would be a change to policy rather than a practice note example, so to speak. But what will come in ahead of that will be the change to legislation. So, a significant tool in terms of helping deliver on the ecological emergency will be the legal requirement for biodiversity net gain. So that work is taking place. Policies will ultimately change, and there are action plans being worked up. In terms of regulatory decision making, the sharp end that we're all familiar with, we're really waiting for biodiversity net gain to come in by the Environment Act.
So essentially, in terms of this particular application, there's not a great deal that we can rely on, basically, on that front. Frustratingly, yeah,
exactly that.
If I could say that,
right, thank you.
The informal advice that we give to people, which came down through from the Nature Conservation Officer, is at the moment, until policy catches up, we should be looking for a balance. So no net loss, basically no net loss is what we're aiming for. And if we talk to developers, that's the advice that we're giving at the moment. But as Gary says, it will catch up with the legislation, will catch up and change that.
Do we have any further questions? I don't see any hands immediately. Okay, we will move to discussion, and I'll just remind councillors once that please be cognizant of the length of this agenda, and if it doesn't need to be said, then please don't. But hands up for discussion. Oh, no. Oh, no. I don't see any hands. Fabian.
Chair, clearly there's two issues. One is the heat sort of hierarchy, and I'm mindful that we turned down a development to Brislington because we weren't satisfied with what they were proposing there. The other thing that I'm concerned about, and Highway is also concerned about, is the width of the shared path. I'm wondering, personally, I'm mindful that we should look at maybe deferring this and asking officers to go back to the developers to look at the width of the path and address that, and also look at the issue of the heat hierarchy. Because I think those are two valid things that we could maybe hang out for and try and get better. It would mean it would be the new DCA that would have to decide it, but I think that might be the right thing. That might help us make a better decision and get a better outcome here.
Gary did mention the fact that we could condition a strategy for movement of the development towards full compliance with the heat hierarchy. I'm not sure whether we could condition anything that would change that cycle path. Gary, do you want to comment on that, or it's just?
Yeah, I think the heat hierarchy, achieving that via condition is easier because, as Jess has said, it's a combined system already designed, so it'd be a modification of that approach. I think with the shared cycleway pedestrian route, it's a matter of looking at a different scheme, a slightly different scheme, either at the expense of the ecological corridor or having the ecological corridor a 5 metre width and really then impacting upon the rest of the development. So, but clearly, members are able to defer on that issue if you're not currently happy with the scheme before you.
Climate balancing with ecology, that's going to be a story of the future, I think, for us all. Councillor Windows.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm a little bit confused about where we're going as far as the shared cycle pedestrian route is concerned. Am I to understand that it's currently in use by both pedestrians and cyclists?
That's correct, yes.
But did I understand our highways representative to say that that's not allowed?
I think the updated policy approach in terms of standards of new cycleways and where they're shared with pedestrians is to seek a width of 5 metres. So we're caught between dealing with that request, that requirement, versus what's there at the moment, what can be delivered on the site at the moment as per this proposal, which you can obviously take a view either way on. And also I would add the width of the shared route either side of this site. So they're all matters that you need to take into account, and it's legitimate to take a view either way, really. But that's where the 5 metre width request comes in from. It's for, you know, new or improved routes, and this is the overarching view we've taken is that, you know, a re-provision, bearing in mind the other issues on the site, you know, with all due respect to our transport colleagues, is the correct way, but on balance.
Is it possible
I see. Yeah, go on, please.
Thank you. I mean, in regards to the 5 metres, what I'm saying is that it's actually about having full segregation between pedestrians and cyclists, so that they're not intermingling, as it were, so that cyclists have got sufficient room to be able to cycle at speed, and there's no risk of any conflict. And, you know, that approach is what was taken in regards to the application that came in regards to Airport Road, and it's also something that, you know, that we've learnt to our cost, that where we haven't segregated, such as in the city centre, we then have had a lot of complaints afterwards, particularly from you know, pedestrians with visual impairments, for example. So that's our position anyway.
So could I just ask through the chair, is it the position that you have had complaints about this particular 3 metre cycle stroke pedestrian way? Have you had any?
Sorry, are you asking me?
Well, I think you're the person that can help on that.
Okay, not to my knowledge, no. But as Gary explained, under the guidance, you know, there's a where you've got new infrastructure going in, and where there's more than I think it's 300 cyclists per hour, then we should be looking to have full segregation.
So it's an aspiration rather than a law. Am I right?
Yes.
Oh, that's fine. Thanks very much for that.
Okay.
Thank you. Can we move clearly to discussion now, Robert? I think we've finished questions, unless anyone's absolutely got a question. And Mark, do you have a question?
I'd just like to, I understand, I don't know whether this is true, that actually the shared path works perfectly well at the moment. That's the thing. So it's, I think, you know, obviously for us, we need to move towards what you're talking about, Steve or Stephen, but it actually is working at the moment. So I think that's what we need to think, and then have an aspiration of moving forward, if that's possible. But I mean, you know, I just think you have a lot of aspirations in highways, but they're not always feasible.
Okay. Are we
or deliverable?
Thanks, Mark. Discussion now, unless, are we all right for discussion now? Great. Okay, in that case, Councillor Clark, followed by Councillor Hance on discussion, please. And no further questions to officers.
It's a comment really to
that's perfect. Yeah, in discussion, you're free to make comments, Steve.
Yeah, it's a comment to Councillor Windows. I mean, I personally use this about 3 or 4 times a week, both walking and on bikes, and it works perfectly well. I agree with Marge, although whatever aspirations we might have, you know, we can't always get them. I mean, overall, I feel quite unenthusiastic about this application, but this is a place that's been empty for a long time. It's currently, you know, ugly hard standing. I don't think the views are too impacted, so I think I'll be voting for it.
Thank you. Fee?
So disagreement amongst Green Party stock. I find it a bit scary. I've been clogged up a few times on that cycle path with pedestrians willy-nilly. So I would dispute that it works that well at the moment. However, I'm not entirely sure it's a complete game stopper. It's not desperately beautiful. I completely sympathise with some people saying it's certainly not enhancing the heritage aspect of the area. but there is, you know, there are significant benefits to be gained. So like Steve, you know, I think it's especially if we get in the heat pump severe talking to, if not condition, I'd be willing to vote for it, but not with a huge amount of enthusiasm, but it'll do. Do you know what I mean? The cycle path will do. Yeah, there we are. Shut up now.
No, thank you. Steve?
Yeah, I essentially agree with what's been said, so I won't repeat it. In terms of how we get that done, apologies if this is a question, Chair, but in terms of process, to get that condition in, to have the strategy, does that mean we need to initially vote down the recommendation and then propose something else, or can we just...
No, I'll use Chair's discretion to include that condition in the office.
Thank you very much.
Does anyone have a proposal then, which would be the officer's recommendation with the condition?
Happy to propose that with a condition.
Okay, so we have Paul Goggin and Steve Smith seconding. So that's the officer's recommendation with the condition added that a strategy of movement towards full compliance with heat hierarchy is included in that one that is satisfactory to officers. Is everyone clear on the motion before us? Okay, then I will move round the screen and ask you to say for, against, or abstain, please. Okay, Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Hants.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Hickman.
For.
Councillor Khan.
For.
Councillor Windows.
For.
Councillor Breckles.
For.
Councillor Goggin.
For.
Myself, for. That should make 8, I think, because is that correct, Jeremy? Do you have 8?
Got 9 there, Chair.
You've got
9 for.
That's correct, actually. It should be 9.
With just one councillor not voting as, yeah.
Exactly. So that is then approved. Thank you very much, everybody. We move on now to our next item, which is the Soapworks. I'm going to ask Gary if he would just open up by setting a kind of procedural context before the public forum, in order that if public forum speakers wish to respond to that, they will have heard what is being said and be able to respond accordingly. Thanks, Gary.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So just briefly, I just wanted to set out for committee members, but also everyone watching, what the position is at the moment. The committee considered this application at its last meeting and deferred a decision. That's the key thing to bear in mind. The committee deferred a decision. It didn't make a partial decision, even though the committee made reference to supporting a scheme in certain circumstances or not supporting a scheme in other circumstances, which Lewis will talk you through. It's just important to note that the committee have to consider all of the issues today. Whilst the presentation will be focused on the issues that were key at the last discussion, obviously, if members either want us to go through the other issues again, or if members are subbing today, weren't here last time, and would like further information on any of those issues, we're happy to provide it this afternoon. It's important that members feel fully confident that they have all the issues and information before them before they make a decision. And the key aspect really is to be aware that really the committee could make any decision this afternoon. The only thing that happened last time was a deferral. So, Chair, hopefully that clarifies where the committee is this afternoon in terms of decision making.
Thanks, Gary. That's very clear. I move now to our public forum speakers, and I also welcome Councillor Mead to the meeting. Welcome, Ollie. Our first public forum speaker is Don Wood, I believe.
Hi, thank you, councillors. I know I've got a minute, so I will be quick. I'm I spoke last time, so you may remember this. I run a local charity to the Soapworks, and I can confirm that I've been consulted on and kept up to date since the initial consultations, and through all of the amendments that have been made through this. And I was here last time and listened to it all, where it was where lots of people objected to the hotel, and I say that's been removed. There's been great engagement with our charity as a neighbour, local business, but also with our service users who were very supportive of the mix of housing that's there. And it's quite rare for people to be able to engage with young people, and particularly young homeless people. So it was good work on their part. Independent people and I welcome the mix of housing, including affordable housing, that's been being provided on the site, and it will meet local needs and help tackle what is indeed a massive housing crisis that we've got. Housing is part of what we do as a charity, and we know that the area is very sought after and that the new housing is very much needed. In terms of other things to do with the area, our staff report feeling unsafe in the area at night. We have used Gardner Haston's car park for our staff, and they have regularly reported feeling unsafe going back to their car of an evening time. And the proposals, we believe, will greatly improve that safety and feeling of safety and the connections from Temple Meads to Old Market and in the area, and improve that fear of crime that's reported quite regularly. The focus on the public spaces will, I believe, will help create a sense of community and belonging. I've been in the area with our organisation since 2009, and it's regenerated well over this time. And I think that the mixture of housing, safer spaces, and indeed space for local businesses would be really important. And that's all I have to say.
Dom, thanks very much. And thank you for coming back on a second occasion, and for others, public forum participants who've been patient with us and come back again to allow us to give the time to this that we felt we needed. Thank you very much. Alice Palmer-Brown.
Hiya, can you see me?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, my name is Alice.
Thank
yeah,
you.
perfect. So my name is Alice Palmer-Brown, and I am digital champion at Off the Record Bristol. So we're a mental health charity for young people. I'm speaking today in support and on behalf of Leah McKinnon, who's the Director of Engagement, who cannot be here today. So our main base is in West Street in the Old Market area of Bristol, nearby to the site of the new development from First Base. Today, I and we have been impressed by First Base's commitment to community engagement and liaison with city partners through the consultation process. We've worked collaboratively with the project team on the scheme to support community wellbeing through design such as introduction of green public spaces and resources for young people.
Thank you very much.
Cool, thank you.
Joe Hawkins, please. Oh, there's Joe, yes. You have 1 minute, Joe.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, loud and clear, thank you.
Okay, so I'm Joe Hawkins from Destination Bristol. I've been working with businesses in the Redcliffe and Temple area to implement a business improvement district, which was successfully voted in earlier this month. I speak in support of this development, which is located within the new bid area, as it will create a more attractive destination for businesses in this part of the city, including new flexible workspace to meet the demands of the post-COVID economy and spaces for independent traders. In total, this development will help to support over 2,000 much needed new jobs, and an increased footfall brought about by the proposals will help to support the existing businesses. The public realm enhancements will improve connectivity for pedestrians and cyclists between Temple Meads, the city centre and Old Market, as well as allowing space for visitors to socialise. Finally, I'm pleased to see that the proposals are sustainable and include commitments to reducing carbon through renewable energy and increased biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben Allen, if Ben is there.
Good afternoon, Chair. Can you hear me?
Can, thank you. Can we see you, or is that not a...
Yep, that should be coming through just now. Possibly not. I'll read my statement.
Thanks, Ben. You've got 1 minute.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm the Managing Director of Gardner Haskins. We're neighbours to the Soapworks scheme, and we continue to trade successfully from the Brunel rooms adjacent to this site, We're also the original owners of the Soapworks site. I'm delighted to see the proposals for the Soapworks site come forward as they have. Over the last year or so, the scheme has evolved and improved, but it does remain faithful to the original concept that so impressed us and was the reason we sold the site to First Base. The scheme will deliver a long-term lasting legacy and bring the site back into use with an exciting and vibrant mix of uses. The plans will also breathe fresh life into the local area by creating a vibrant 18-hour economy 7 days a week. This will benefit all the existing local businesses and traders by massively enhancing the area and increasing customer footfall. It's been a pleasure working with First Base over the last 2 years, and we're looking forward to working with them as a neighbour for the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. Simon Hickman. Simon, are you there?
Yeah,
Simon,
I'm here.
Simon, you've got 1 minute, please. Thank you.
Okay, I'm still hearing the previous speaker. I know he stopped. Sorry, there's a sort of lag between the YouTube and live.
Please turn off your YouTube.
Yeah, right. Sorry, I've turned off my YouTube now. Can you hear me better?
Loud and clear. Lovely.
Right, that's good. All right, well, good to see you again, councillors. I'm Simon Hickman from Historic England. The principal reason for our objection here is the substantial demolition of much of the listed soap pan complex. The historic factory buildings attached to the soap pan building were acknowledged by your officers as listed because of their attachment, and while parts of 2 facades would be retained, the vast majority of these buildings would be demolished. This represents demolition of around 2/3 of a listed building, which would clearly result in considerable harm. The attractive and historic street east elevation and single-storey projection of the building on the corner of Straight Street and New Thomas Street should in particular be retained to give a greater impression of the building's retention, at least in facade terms. But importantly, we see no reason why the wider public benefits offered by this proposals and explained by others as part of this meeting can't be delivered while retaining and adapting the existing buildings. Paragraph 194 of the NPPF says that any harm to a designated heritage asset requires a clear and convincing justification, and that justification simply isn't there. It's obvious that more of these buildings could be retained while still delivering the wider public benefits. So we recommend that the proposals are refused or withdrawn, pending further detailed analysis of the potential for reusing and adapting existing historic fabric. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Simon. Julian Cross. Julian, hello. You have 1 minute, please.
Chairman and councillors. I'm Julian Cross, one of the architects involved. We set out to design a vibrant and functional mixed-use destination, as well as on a well-connected, centrally located site. At the heart of our proposed development, a new, accessible, inclusive public spaces leading to the sensitively restored soap pan building, which will be brought back to life and opened up to the public for the first time in its history. Considering the site's heritage has been a critical issue throughout the development of the proposal and has informed our response to achieve the best use of this site, officers agree that our plans represent less than substantial harm. Where possible, we have also adapted and reused the existing buildings fronting onto the street. However, these existing buildings have multiple floor levels and a variety of floor heights. The reuse of the existing building fabric also has significant limitations in terms of its fire protection, structural capacity, acoustics, and thermal performance. The combination of these factors, as well as an ambition to create a high-quality workspace that is flexible, suited to modern requirements, and able to meet the future demands of the workplace post-COVID, has led us to propose a facade retention to this building. By retaining the important areas of facade but replacing the bulk of the building with a modern, flexible, mixed-mode, large floor place workspace, we feel we are able to deliver the best and relevant use of this important, centrally located site in the safest and most environmentally conscious way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julian. Lucinda Mitchell. Lucinda, are you there?
Hello.
Hello,
Hi.
Lucinda. Hello, Lucinda. You have 1 minute, please.
Hi.
Following the previous committee meeting in March, we have followed your advice committee and removed the apart hotel option. If approved, our plans will deliver 243 much needed homes on the site. First Base has always been committed to delivering a policy compliant level of affordable housing, and should you support your office's recommendation, our proposals will deliver 49 new affordable homes in the sustainable city centre location. Our aim is to create an inclusive and balanced community at Soapworks. Therefore, all the affordable homes will be pepper potted across the development. Heritage has been a key consideration during the preparation of our proposals. The plans will breathe new life into the listed soap pump building and enable local residents to enjoy this iconic building once again, which is a key heritage gain. We've also sought to retain elements of the historic fabric across the rest of the site, whilst creating high quality modern workspaces which will facilitate collaboration and help to support the city's sustainable growth. Since the start of this project in 2019, we've consulted extensively, receiving feedback from around 6,000 consultees. This includes local residents and neighbours, including those living in Kingsley House. We held a number of events at the pre-app stage and have since provided regular updates via post, online and face-to-face. We are pleased that officers are recommending our application for approval and respectfully request that you support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucinda. Elliot Davidson.
Hi.
Hello. Hello. 1 minute.
Thank you. 1 minute. Yeah, I'm. My name's Elliot Davidson. I'm one of 57 residents at Kingsley House. I've been there for 7 years. My neighbour's around 20 years. We've had consistent building works since I've lived here, and our residents already experience a loss of light and lack of privacy from buildings that have been erected to the side and the rear of this Kingsley House. In these plans, the proposal includes a building directly opposite the front of Kingsley House of up to 8 stories in height, twice the height of our building. Our development's 3 stories, and that will mean we're completely overlooked. So more loss of privacy and loss of light will mean we won't get enough natural daylight to see by. We have some residents on the ground floor, which is where I am now in number 1. And if you turn the lights off, Pete, that's with the lights off in this flat. So we just wonder whether you can revise the height of the building directly opposite us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elliot. And our last is Stephen Wickham, please.
Heritage has been a key consideration during the preparation of.
Stephen, are you there? Stephen is on the phone. Oh, is it interesting? Hi, Stephen.
Hello.
Hello.
Sorry,
Hello.
I've still got,
Nice to see you again.
Mitchell going in the background.
No problem. Have 1 minute, Stephen.
Yeah. Heritage and height objection. The recent delay may have disambiguated what is applied for, but it has not mitigated the harm to grade listed buildings which are demolished in the interest of facadism at the former department store or the impact of the 20-storey tower. I'll focus on that given the applicants often do not. Being nearly 70% taller than the nearest neighbours, just erected on Old Bread Street, overshading like a sundial through the day, will be the flats and dwellings on the New Kingsley Road, on Anvil Street and on Old Bread Street, and in winter and spring terms, the school in operation. The developer may indeed have come to terms with the school, but there will be a new reality that future users may be less happy about, and the President may produce other 20-storey applications right outside the school from other applicants at a later date, as well as other parts of the TQE zone. Please refuse the application.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Stephen. And Stephen was our last participant in the public forum. So I'll hand over now to Lewis. Lewis, we did have a very extensive presentation last time, and members have had that in their papers. So perhaps if we could have something a little shorter and use the questions where members feel there are gaps in their knowledge. And yes, perhaps if anything new came up in the public forum, you could also specifically address that. But thank you.
I will do my best, Chairs. Could everybody hear me okay? Good. I'll just see if I can share my screen. Right, hopefully everybody can see that. As you said, Chair, you hopefully members have all seen this presentation previously, so I don't intend to go through it all and just concentrate on the pertinent issues that that came up through the last committee. But the slides are all there still, so if there are things that members do want to see, I'm happy to share the slides during the question period. I think the pertinent starting place is that the description of development has changed from what you considered last month. So as you recall, last month the application included two options: an option A, which is this development essentially, and an option B, which was this, but with reduced residential and an apart hotel. So the apart hotel has gone. That's been removed from the recommendation, and now removed from the description of development, and now the application is for, amongst other things, 243 residential units, which would include 49 affordable units, which is 20% of the overall residential provision. The original recommendation was for the application to be approved, although given the objections from English Heritage, the listed building application would have to be referred to the Secretary of State. That recommendation remains the same with the new description of development. So we're recommending approval of the full planning application and the referral of the listed building application to the Secretary of State. When we were looking at this previously, the recommendation was a balanced one, which looked at the benefits of the scheme against the perceived harm. And if you look at my previous report, the benefits are listed in Part L of the report. The most sort of specific concern about harm was in relation to the listed buildings. So I'll just run you through almost a sort of listed building element in the presentation, just so you can see that element. The application site. In this slide, essentially the green is the conservation area, and the purple is the listed buildings. Most of the buildings on site, I think perhaps all of the buildings on site are listed, although the listing specifically refers to the soap pan building, but because other buildings are attached to it, they are listed by association with that essentially. But to be clear, all the buildings are listed at grade 2. Historic photo of what the site used to look like from 1947, which gives you a useful bit of context. And then there's a few photos which I won't run through because you've had the chance to see these previously. In the last committee, there were queries about what was being demolished and what was retained. So I've just added an extra slide here, which shows that in two-dimensional form. Essentially, the blue is what is retained, which is all of the soap pan building and the facade on Straight Street. And going to the next slide, part of the facade which runs along Sleaze Lane. The pink elements in both of those slides are being proposed to be demolished. The test is, as a local planning authority, we are required to have a special regard to preserving listed buildings and their settings. And we have to give considerable weight to any harm that we perceive to those buildings. So in reaching your decision today, you have to give considerable weight to the harm to listed buildings. We've concluded that the harm is at the level of less than substantial harm, but a high level of less than substantial harm. And you recall I went into, there was some discussion about that at the previous committee. The point being that there is a different test that must be applied if we feel that there is substantial harm to the one that can be applied to a level of harm which is less than substantial. So in this case, the test under the MPPF, where there is less than substantial harm, is that we have to demonstrate that the public benefits of the scheme outweigh that level of harm. And that's what we've sought to do through the previous committee report. And that's how we've reached the recommendation that we have. When this was discussed at the previous committee, I think members concluded that they were minded to accept that argument regarding the benefits of the scheme outweighing the harm, but only for option A of the development, which was the option that's before you now. But they did have concerns about the benefits that would arise from the apart hotel. In discussions, it was considered that those benefits were less than for the residential, particularly in the sense of providing less affordable housing. And therefore, they were minded to not accept the argument when it came to the provision of the apart hotel. So ultimately, the applicant has listened. The applicant has come back to us and agreed to remove the apart hotel. Therefore, our conclusions, officer conclusions, are the same. We still feel that the benefits outweigh the harm, and hence with the recommendation remains as with the previous report. As I say, I can run through any of the rest of the slides that you want to see, but I am minded that members have seen them before, so I'll leave it to members to ask for that. And I'll try and stop sharing screen if I can. Bear with me. There we go.
Thank you, Lewis. Questions? Paul, your hand is up.
Thanks. No, it just not really a question, but just to say thanks for that extra slide, Lewis. That's really made everything a lot clearer with the red and the blue. Cheers.
Thank you. Steve Smith and Ollie.
Yeah, thanks for that, Lewis. Just want to clarify, just so I'm completely clear, that what we're looking at now is exactly the same as option A was last time. So the apart hotel's gone, but that's the only thing that's changed. And the balance of benefits and harms in option A are exactly the same as they were 3 weeks ago. Is that right?
Yes. The package of 106 contributions was slightly different from option A and option B. So from memory, one of the contributions was a bit higher for option B, but that's the only sort of potential impact in terms of benefits that you need to take into account. Otherwise, this is the same scheme, just with option B removed.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Ollie?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to second what Paul said about the usefulness of the extra slide, but also just to ask a quick question. Because we had in public forum a man talking about the light issues that could affect neighbouring properties and buildings and things. And I just wondered if that had, I've read the papers, but I don't remember seeing anything much about that in the papers, and had that been assessed as part of the assessment by our officers?
Yes, it's in, I think it's in key issue E of the original report. I do sort of go into a little bit of detail about it. It is quite complicated, and I suppose the blunt answer is there will be an impact in terms of lighting on some of the properties in the nearby area. The balance, or the consideration here is, at the moment what you've got is a car park. Any development on that car park of any sort of scale whatsoever will have some impact in terms of lighting. And this is a high density residential area, and you know, there are elements which perhaps if it was, you know, a suburban area, we would say that wasn't acceptable. So I think ultimately we've come to a balanced view on the impact on lighting. There will be an impact on lighting on some properties. There isn't any case, I don't believe, where a property will be sort of impacted in its entirety. So there are some where maybe a bedroom will be impacted, but there are other windows which are which will not be impacted and will have the same degree of light as it does now. The orientation is also relevant, and whilst I think Mr. Wickham described it as a sundial going across the site from the tower, that will happen, but at the height of the day, because of the orientation on the site, the shadow all falls on the site, and its impacts on the evening on one side and on the morning on the other, essentially. So it doesn't. There's nowhere where the impact is sort of all day or on all of the rooms or anything like that. So again, it's a balanced view, but officers were satisfied that the harm wasn't significant enough to warrant refusal of the application.
Thank you. Councillor Hickman.
I'd just like to follow up with that, because the block of flats that the person was talking about is actually mainly council tenants live in it. And over the last 10 years, there's been an inordinate amount of development in that area. So they're feeling quite beleaguered and a little bit like a pincer movement now with the car park going to be developed. What I understand from the developers when I've spoken to them in my role as the councillor for because it's in the ward I represent, is that they're going to specifically work with the community group in that block, which there is an active community group, and will endeavour to mitigate some of the circumstances. But there is no doubt that the light will be impacted. But they are. I agree with the officer, even though reluctantly, about it. And I think as long as the developers take it on board, which they've said they will, and they give clear indication that they do work, and they've already been in communication with the tenants. So I just wanted to reassure the committee, really.
Thank you. I see no further questions. Discussion. Would anyone like to open up discussion or not have a discussion? Or Paul?
Thanks, Chair. I'm muting myself. Yeah, my only objection last time was the apart hotel, which reduced the number of social housing, and now that's been been changed and taken out. I'm happy to back this.
Thank you. Fabian, I have next on my list.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you know, we basically reached a decision which, you know, get the apart hotel idea gone, and we'll approve it. So they've done that. So I move the vote. I propose to move to the vote. We've got such a packed agenda tonight.
Fabian, I'm just going to allow other people to comment first before I invite the motion to be a vote. But thank you. I have Stephen Clark and then Marg.
Just to say that I agree with Paul Goggin. I'm very happy they've listened to us and would approve this.
Thank you. Sorry, Ollie, did I miss you out? And then Marg, I think.
Oh, thank you, Chair. No, because I took my hand down earlier, and then anyway.
It was your fault.
Same colour as the wall behind me, which probably doesn't help anyone. I'll move the gadget in a minute. Yeah, it's kind of there's kind of an irony that it's an underappreciated heritage asset, being where it is, because no one goes there. And the most likely way of getting people to end up going there and having increased footfall is to have the building that we're thinking of approving this afternoon, and having more people around there. So it's, yeah, it's kind of, and it is. I understand Historic England's concern about the loss of a heritage asset, and it's beautiful. I love the brickwork. I think that kind of thing's great fun. It's fun to sketch and paint as well as to look at. But equally, it's not somewhere where I would go myself, particularly to look for this kind of thing. And I think just because it's an area that no one's, it's not sort of a tourist hotspot. If it was by the docks or something, I think we'd be feeling quite differently about the balance of heritage assets and public benefit. I think the big public benefit is that there could be some decent housing there, and that's desperately needed. And also, hopefully, as if Councillor Hickman was saying about the local residents group and the likelihood of cooperation with them, I hope that any issues can be resolved that way as well if they do turn up in the future. So yeah, I'd be happy to support it.
Thank you. Steve Smith?
Yeah, very quickly, Chair. I just wanted to explain why I'm going to vote the way I'm going to vote. That for me, the apartheid toll wasn't the issue last time. It was the overall balance of harms and benefits when you look at heritage and design and various other things that have been raised just came slightly down on the wrong side, and somewhat reluctantly for me, I voted against. And since that balance hasn't changed, I'm going to do the same thing again, somewhat reluctantly, although I suspect I might be in a minority this time.
Anyone else that I've missed out? My list got slightly confused here, so put your virtual hand up if you wish to comment any further. In that case, Fabian, you did wish to, I'm sorry I cut you short, but I just want to make sure everyone had a chance to speak. The officer's recommendation and his approval of the planning application, but then the referral of the listed building consent to the Ministry of whatever. That is it. Am I correct, Gary? Would you like to put it in a more, frankly, better way?
I don't know whether I can, Chair, but yeah, just to confirm, the recommendation for the planning application is to grant permission, and for the listed building consent application, you are correct that has to be referred to the National Casework Unit to see whether there is a calling from the Secretary of State due to Historic England's objection to the substantial demolition involved.
Thank you. Fabian has proposed that. Do I have a seconder, please? Hall, Goggin, seconds. Okay, I'll go around the screen as I see you, and please answer for, against, or abstain. Councillor Steve Smith.
Against.
Councillor Feehans.
For.
Councillor Stephen Clark.
For.
Councillor Chris Windows.
For.
Councillor Ollie Mead.
For.
Councillor Fabian Breckles.
For.
Councillor Mark Hickman.
For.
Councillor Paul Goggin.
For.
Myself, for. Jeremy, is that 9 votes?
Yes, correct, Chair. That is 9 votes. That's 8 in favour and 1 against.
Thank you. Then the application is approved. We will now, it's 56. Could we return at 10 minutes past 4, please? That gives you 14 minutes, but strictly 10 minutes past 4. Thank you.
Chair, no.
Yes.
Yeah, just going to say that obviously I won't be able to hear the third one through to the end, so I may as well give my apologies and go now.
Well, thank you for your service this year on this committee, Chris, as we won't be seeing you again.
Oh, would you know something I don't know?
I meant in this municipal year, and I'll make no further comment on this.
Oh, I'm so relieved.
But yeah. Thank you for your work this year, Chris.
Thanks. Cheers. Bye.
Bye. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Is everybody present? Could councillors please turn their cameras on? Councillor Khan. Are you there, Councillor Khan? I'm going to begin. Councillor Khan, are you present for this item?
Yes. Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Clark.
Stephen Clark's just joining from the waiting room.
Hi, Stephen. Okay. Excuse me. Right, let us begin. Gary, you were just going to set a procedural context similar to the previous item. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, same as the previous item, really, at an earlier meeting, the committee considered this application and deferred decision. That's the important thing for everyone to bear in mind. Whilst the committee said that it was minded to refuse and was concerned about a number of issues, which we're reporting back on today, the key thing is that no decision was reached. So it's important for everyone to be aware that, again, any decision could be made this afternoon on the application. And again, members, before making or participating in the decision, should feel that they are confident that they have all the information they need to make the decision. Lewis's presentation will be focused on those main issues that were raised last time, but if you need us to go back to any aspect of the proposal or any of the other issues, please let us know. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We move now to public forum. Our first speaker is Mr. Stuart Phelps.
Good evening, Chair. Can you see me?
Yes, thank you.
Right, fine. I will be as brief as I possibly can. You've had a long meeting. I seem to spend a large part of my life fighting off outrageous planning applications next to the school. You've got in front of you various statements from people, and we are seriously questioning what is happening. This school has about 60% of the children non-white. We've been monitoring through a related group called RAID, the PM 2.5 levels down there, and they're about 10 to 20% higher than the surrounding area. And so we do question the council's modelling on PM 2.5. On road safety, there's reference to an informal pedestrian crossing. It's so informal that if you could see photographs, and I think there are some around, of what happens on a regular morning, you would see that often that crossing is completely obscured by parked lorries and other vehicles. And it's a serious issue now. When you've got more lorries coming out of that site, it will be a major one. We are asking you to look seriously at questions around how broke the planning system is, because if children are put before the costs of fighting an appeal, I'm afraid there are serious questions in the city around what exactly the system is.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Neil Grundon.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Neil. We can hear you perfectly well. Thanks.
Thank you. My name's Neil Grundon. I'm Deputy Chairman of Grundon Waste Management. We're a family business and we've been established 90 years. My grandfather started the business in 1929. We take our relationship with our employees and our neighbours and our local authority neighbours very, very seriously. As a company, you don't get to be around this long without taking those things very seriously. Most of the issues that I think have been contentious in this application will be dealt with in the permit. Over the last 7 years, we've invested 20 million in Bristol and Avonmouth. In the next 3 years, we plan to invest the same. Our application will cut down vehicle miles, help sort waste at the point of origin, and provide well-paid jobs. And I do hope that you go with your officer's recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. Heidi Taylor. Heidi, are you there? I think you are. Heidi, are you there?
Just connecting at the moment.
Okay.
If there are problems connecting, perhaps move on to the next one.
Emma Jones, do we have Emma?
And perhaps put Heidi Taylor back in the waiting room.
It seems to be taking a while to connect people to audio.
Shall we try the next person?
I'll try the next person along.
Christina Biggs.
Christina. Looks like we've got Christina.
Hello.
Hi, Tina. Is your connection all right? Hi, Tina.
Hi, can you hear me?
See you and hear you. You've got 1 minute, Tina. Thank you.
Great. Yes. We're very. I'm representing today the Bristol Clean Air Alliance. We've been fighting very hard for clean air in the centre of Bristol. We're obviously relieved that there's a clean air zone, but we have not had any assurance that that there is not an increase of particulate and NO2 from the presence of the clean air zone causing drive round. We've asked questions about this. We've really appreciated an answer in terms of the total NOx that would be present. So we don't know what the effect will be on St Philip's Marsh. So please, while this is in question, and certainly anyway, you should not be handling waste anywhere near a nursery school. There's plenty of facilities out in Avonmouth, Sevenside, which is where that kind of industry should be. Yes, and please, officers, can you answer my questions, which were put to a cabinet a couple of months ago now?
Thanks, Tina. Can I come back to Heidi? Is Heidi there?
I've not been able to get Heidi yet. I'll keep trying, but I've just moved on to the next person, so I will try and get Heidi back in.
All right, Shona.
Hello. Yes, thank you, Chair.
Hi, Shona. You have 1 minute. Thank you very much.
Yes, so I am speaking against this application. I am a Labour councillor candidate for the ward Lawrence Hill. I would like to draw the committee's attention in particular to the concerns around odour and flies, which the reports state that given the sensitive nature of the nearby receptors, that is the nursery school children, the potential for increases in these issues can't be ruled out. Obviously, this would be very serious. I'm sure the councillors are all extremely aware of the complaints that have been happening in Avonmouth around flies there. It is in the bottom of a valley, so is likely to collect the odour. And I'm also concerned about the increase in traffic pollution. The life expectancy in this area is already lower than many parts of the city, so I'm sure you appreciate that local residents and the nursery school are extremely worried about increase in pollution. So I would urge the committee to reject this application or at least send it off for further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Shona.
We have Emma Jones, who is after Heidi Taylor.
Emma.
She's managed to connect. Thank you.
Welcome, Emma. You have 1 minute.
Good afternoon. I'm a parent of a 3-year-old child that attends St Philip's Marsh Nursery School. My older daughter also attended. My older daughter suffered a lot from croup. The high amount of pollution that is around there seriously does affect their chest. My youngest daughter is in and out of hospital now and again with bronchitis. Again, it can seriously affect their chest. Surely my child matters, or my children matter as much as anybody else's. Especially as most of these children come over from Barton Hill because they have no green space to play in. They go to nursery so that they can play in the green space. And surely if you want to up the pollution down there, it's going to be damaging for their chest as well as the staff, as well as our children. So please do not allow this development to go ahead. It's obviously the wrong place to have it.
Thank you. Thank you, Emma. Taylor, have we got Heidi here? Yeah.
We have, but I don't think she's got any audio.
Okay. Well,
did you want me to move on to the next person?
Denise Draper is the next person on my list then.
I'll add Denise Draper now.
She can come down. Once you let us in, we'll get her to come down here.
Denise, can you turn your YouTube off, please? And we can hear you.
Heidi is with us, so she's in another room. We can get her to come down and speak off my computer afterwards if this is better for you.
Okay, you can have 1 minute each, but could you please turn the YouTube off, then we can hear you both.
We haven't got YouTube on.
Okay, great. 1 minute each then, please.
I'm a mother and a teacher, not a scientist or a lawyer. I cannot argue against this application using NO2 or particulate level data. It's not me, it's somebody else. Sorry. Sorry, it's not on my computer, so can you hear me okay now?
Much better.
Sorry, it's somebody else's. I was telling them to turn it off.
No problem, carry on.
Okay, do you want me to start from the beginning? Sorry.
Yes, please, yeah.
Okay. I'm a mother and a teacher, not a scientist or a lawyer, and I cannot argue against this application using NO2 or particulate level data, although the WHO organisation stated that no level is safe and that we need to do more. Lawrence Hill is the most deprived ward in Bristol, and it is recognised that low-income families disproportionately bear the burden of air pollution. Families who send their children here have to walk to and from school, thus increasing their exposure to toxic fumes. We have a duty of care to our community and to protecting children's lives and health. We can only assume what the impact of this proposal will have on air pollution, noise, traffic and vermin, but we do not know. We cannot say that this proposal will not cause harm to children, families and workers. We can only predict and guess. What is clear is that we need to protect the community from harm and do more to ensure equality of opportunity and improved health outcomes. Not granting this application will allow regeneration. Sorry, I can't read. Regeneration of the area. Air pollution affects everyone, but in particular vulnerable groups such as children and the elderly. It is more prevalent in less affluent areas. As a city, we need to commit to achieving cleaner air around schools and not making decisions that will make it worse, however small we guess the impact will be. I implore and urge you all to reject this application on behalf of our receptacles, families and staff in the community, and put health first.
Thanks, Denise. Did you say that
Yeah, Heidi's here as well, so she's going to join you.
Thank you. Heidi,
sorry.
1 minute, like everybody else. Thank you.
Apologies. I'm an early years practitioner at St Philip's Marsh Nursery. I work directly with these sensitive receptors, but let's remember these are small children, 2, 3 and 4-year-old children. They can't speak, so I'm going to be their voice. And I'm really passionate to read this to you. Imagine you don't have the luxury of a garden. Imagine you are 3 or 4 stuck in a high-rise flat and keen to explore the world. How exciting when you get to nursery and you can finally run free in our garden, free to run and climb and feel the earth between your fingers. This is early years education, something I'm completely passionate about. These are make or break years, the very spark of curiosity, ready to be ignited into a lifelong learner. The proposal of a rubbish dump opposite a nursery, bringing traffic noise, the stench of rubbish, flies, rats down on the very oasis in this city I am trying to create is absolutely ludicrous. And I implore you to stand up for our children's fight for freedom and fresh air. Children and adults with asthma are already being compromised by increasing levels of pollution in this country, as in the case of Ella Adu Deborah, who lived in a heavily congested South London road. These children are some of the most deprived in the city, already fighting the biggest hurdles in their education. We know how crucial lifelong education is.
Heidi, I think come to a conclusion, please. Thank you.
Please don't make it more difficult than it already is for these children to access it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, both of you. Mr. Simon Holmes is there, perhaps? Simon?
Then you need to press your cross.
Hello.
Press the cross.
Hello, Simon. You've got
Cross.
1 minute, please.
I can't. How do I get myself?
You can't just go.
Hello.
Hello. 1 minute, sir.
Okay. Well, I think you can hear the passion and anger from a lot of people. There's actually several hundred more who could come forward. There's huge opposition to this proposal in our community amongst all the parents, the families, and as well local businesses. I'm surprised to hear Grundon say about their community engagement because we've not had one single conversation about this. We've not been approached once. So I'm really interested to hear about that. I just hope that the councillors could follow the courage of their convictions because we know, and I think everybody knows, this is a ludicrous proposal to put opposite a nursery school in the middle of a city which already has the highest deprivation, highest degree of lung infections and hospitalizations in the city. It's the wrong thing in the wrong place. I'm sure the committee is worried that if the application is refused, it'll be appealed and the council can bear the costs. I would just like to remind you that Plutus Energy was also recommended by planning officers and went to the planning inspectorate, who actually also refused it, because actually I don't think there's a school in the country, let alone in Bristol, where this would be seen as a good idea by anybody. So please put our children first, put our community first, and follow your conscience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. John Phelps.
Hello.
Hello. You have
good afternoon.
1 minute. 1 minute, Mr. Phelps.
Okay, my name is John Phelps. Now, although I work for Grundon, I'm here to talk in a personal capacity as someone who works in the city and would therefore be affected by the proposal. I believe that Bristol and the surrounding area has a major issue when it comes to waste disposal. This month, both of the incinerators at Avonmouth are closed. The CETA site closed for their annual month-long shutdown, while Viridor developed a fault, causing them to close for 3 weeks. As a result, the majority of Bristol's commercial waste was shipped either to incinerators further afield, such as Gloucester, or taken to Shortwood landfill. I'm told Shortwood landfill only has a few months left before it closes. Grendon's transfer station would reduce the number of wagons having to do long runs, moving small amounts of waste to Avonmouth or beyond, thus cutting CO2 emissions in and around the city. Over my 20 plus years in the waste industry, I have visited numerous waste transfer sites. Compared to other waste operators, Grendon's sites have stood out as the cleanest, most well-managed sites. When it comes to the local environment, Grendon have very high standards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Phelps. That's the end of our public forum. So I'll hand over to Lewis for a brief presentation, but obviously picking up on some of the issues that were raised last time and some of the things perhaps in the public forum. And I thank all the members, people who came to the public forum, because I realise some of you have come a second time, and that's not your fault, but it is a part of the process that we have that chance to hear you again as we look at this afresh. Thanks, Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Again, members, most of the members will have seen these slides before, so I don't intend to spend an awful lot of time running through the slides. Hang on, what's happened there? There we go. Let me just see if I can share that. So yeah, the application is the same as came before you. I think it was in March, where it was recommended approval for a waste transfer station on the site in St Philip's Marsh. The reason it was recommended for approval was that it's on a site which is allocated for industrial use, and the policy for waste uses basically says that that is suitable for such uses, and the officers had assessed the environmental impacts of the development and found that that those impacts could be mitigated with appropriate management and those sort of things to ensure that the impacts on neighbouring uses was not significant or harmful. Just to bring to your attention, I hope you've had a chance to have a look at the amendment sheet. There's a further 19 objections listed on the amendment sheet, and following that, there has been a further 9 objections submitted to us since then. Those are largely concerns about environmental impacts and highway impacts and the things you've heard about today. I'll just quickly flick through the slides. As I say, I won't say very much, but there's a couple later on which is relevant to the discussion. That's the application site, and showing it adjacent to the St Philip's Nursery, where a number of the objections have come from. And again, that's within the wider context of St Philip's Marsh. And just an aerial photo of the site. Buildings proposed on the site, a waste transfer building and a trailer stall. Those are the locations of the noise monitors, and we concluded that the impact on noise would be acceptable. Right. So when this was discussed at committee previously, members expressed concerns about a number of aspects of the scheme, primarily odour, potential increase in vermin, and air quality, and essentially said that they were minded to object to the scheme on those issues. And so I've asked officers to review the position on those aspects of the scheme. I'll start with air quality. in one sense, it's the easiest to deal with, although it's quite complicated. But I've included in the presentation the tables from the air quality assessment. Now you've got the specific impacts in terms of the nursery in your pack, which shows the impact of the development. So yes, what I would say about air quality is this is an objective test. So this is based on national standards, which Bristol City Council use in the assessment of applications. And on the basis of those assessments, there is a target which we would apply to any potentially polluting industry or residential if there was lots of traffic movement, or any planning application. And you'll see in your papers the objective for NO2 is 40 micrograms, I think, and the impact. The other two figures you'll see is the predicted position without the development and with the development. So I think in a couple of cases in your pack, you'll see that there's a very small increase in terms of the amount of pollutants, but in each case, it's well below the standards that we're required to test against. The advice from our air quality officers in the council is that this development would not have a harmful impact. That test is precautionary in the sense that it takes account of potential impacts on people with breathing difficulties, for example, and in the absence of any other evidence, it would be very difficult to support a refusal on air quality grounds. I'll go back to the plan again because I think it's just useful to see that. The other two issues that were raised by members previously are less objective and are possibly slightly more difficult to deal with through the planning process. And this is odour and vermin. Obviously, the impacts of those are to a degree subjective. One person finds acceptable may not be acceptable to somebody else, and there's no objective target that we can test against. What we do think, given the is that whilst there will be an impact, there is a potential for an impact in respect to the nursery. We feel that that can be managed, but it does obviously depend on the management of the facility and ensuring that is tightly controlled. Now, the issue we have is that will be controlled through an environmental agency permit and not through the planning process. So I suppose the result of that is that I cannot say that there will be no impact in terms of the nursery, and that's reflected in my update report in terms of suggested how to deal with that if members felt that was a significant issue that warranted the refusal of the application. I'll just say one other thing about the local authority equalities duty. You've heard a few comments today about equalities impact, and we do have a duty to ensure that we take equalities into account in what we do, but I suppose it's not enough to conclude that just because this facility is going to a place where there is levels of deprivation which is above the average for the city, or people with specific protected characteristics, it's not enough on its own to say that that means that it's discriminatory. We would have to find a degree of harm in respect of the impacts of development on those protected characteristics in order to conclude that it was discriminatory. Now, the officer's view is that that harm can be managed and can be mitigated, and therefore the officer conclusion is that it would not be a discriminatory permission, and if you're minded to, the permission would be sound on those grounds. However, I am mindful of the fact that that does depend on the control of the EA through the permit process, and members may feel less comfortable in that position, that it's another party who's involved. So those were the issues that were raised at the previous committee. The area is allocated for employment use, and as I said at the outset, and our recommendation still stands with a tweak to the conditions. You'll see there's I think the previous condition 11 has been removed, and a new condition 5 has been added from the previous report, which related to flooding. They were referred to at the previous committee, but that was something that happened after the report. So our recommendation, as I say, is to approve, but hopefully I've covered those issues that give members concern and allow them to debate that. So I'll pass back to you, Chair.
Thanks, Lewis. I think that was exceptionally clear about the difficulties of this, but was an exceptionally clear presentation. Thank you very much. Questions from members? Would you like to put your hands up, your virtual hands, if you would? Fee is the person with the first hand up.
Okay, so I can understand you're a bit hamstrung by the information that you have here, Lewis, but there's a certain sympathy for local residents. Obviously, I think we all have a certain sympathy with local residents who see this proposal coming up and do find it awfully, should we say, counterintuitive that there'll be no change in air quality whatsoever as a result of this development. Can you kind of explain how this can be so, please, in words of one syllable that I could understand? And also, I wasn't part of the original planning committee, so this may be old news to some of you, I apologise. And also, can you also explain in words of one syllable, preferably, how the kind of vermin stroke odour issues could potentially be managed? Because again, that's not completely clear to myself, and possibly not to people who have taken part in this. Thank you.
So the air quality, I'm certainly not an expert on air quality. We have got an air quality team in the council who have advised me on this. My understanding of the data that we have is that air quality is generally much worse in the city where it's next to very busy roads. So in this location, the results from Bath Road, for example, to the south of the site are worse than the results from St Philip's Marsh, and the case that's been referred to in the public forum of the girl in London who so sadly died. That was by a main road in the centre of London, and those polluting impacts are largely from vehicles. That's a sort of wider picture in terms of air quality. On a sort of local level, it does depend to a degree on how the site is managed. The facility is largely internal, so most of the sort of sorting of waste and that sort of thing will be going on inside a building. It will have an open frontage, but that will be screened. So the actual wider impacts of this are relatively limited, or are designed to be relatively limited. and it's a similar issue with sort of vermin and odours and things like that. The assessment suggests that they will handle some organic waste, but that will be a relatively limited quality. So we're mostly dealing with dry waste from businesses. This is not, this is not your brown bins that you put out every week with food waste and that sort of waste. It's a different character of waste, and again, the precautions that are put in place are sorting of the waste internally, sprays to dampen down the odours. There was a list of things. Hang on, sorry. Oh yeah, and the any external containers being sealed, and also the orientation of the building to make sure that it's focused away from the sensitive receptor, in this case the nursery. So yeah, there are a number of measures which are trying to address those impacts.
Thanks. Ollie?
Thank you, Chair. And just a couple of quick questions. So on page 134, so I'm just trying to work out which bit of my scrawly handwriting I needed to focus on, then I nearly went cross-eyed. But it said that there's a reference to an environmental impact assessment not having been done yet. Has that been done since then? Because that seemed to be flagged up by one of the local councillors.
No, so the environmental impact assessment is a formal process which we have to apply to certain types of application. This application falls below the criteria for requiring an environmental impact assessment. It tends to be very large applications or applications in greenfield sites and that sort of thing. Having said that, the environmental impact assessment would look at things like noise and odour and those sort of things. So we have the information anyway, but it's just not set out as an EIA specifically.
Fine. Also, we're told that there's going to be a modest increase in air pollution. Is that now? Because we're all lay people, so I'm going to really not sound very scientific for a moment, but it'll make sense to me, and it's me who's got to make a decision on this one. So, but the modest increase in air pollution that's mentioned that would be likely to happen, is that small relative to the existing levels already there, or would it be quite noticeable increase in an area that had better quality air, so where there was less existing pollution?
It's quite a difficult question to answer. It's quite a subjective question to answer, councillor, to be honest. I suppose the technical answer to that is that it would be well below the level that we would have a concern about in terms of meeting targets. My guess would be that the term that he used is negligible, so it may be noticeable, but on a very small level. But on a subjective level, it's really difficult to answer. But on an objective level, it's well below the level that we would have a concern about.
And just no, I think I'll stick with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Marg, and then Councillor Khan.
Work out what to press. I was just this assessment of pollution. It is just baffling that it's negligible, and I'm just wondering, when you've done, or whoever's done this assessment, have they done it for little people, or have they done it for adults? Because the people we're most concerned about are the little people who'll be walking along that road. I don't know whether everybody's been there, but it's a pretty hideous road. And the nursery is an utter haven. So I'm just thinking of all these little people that I've seen walking along, because a lot of people walk, they don't drive their children there. and then the increase in traffic, it's hard not to think that those little people will not be impacted. And I'd just like to know, because I have all this thing, you know, there was a book about how everything is organised around men, you know, medicine, buildings. I can't remember what the book was, but it was fascinating. And, you know, so it's, I'm just wondering whether this has been organised around adults rather than little people, and it's them that are so important.
I think all I can really tell you is the objective targets are precautionary, and they do take into account that there may be that it's not just on the basis of, you know, an healthy adult being impacted. So they're designed to ensure that the air quality is acceptable for anybody to breathe. And that's how the targets are dealt with.
And is anybody a child? I mean, normally anybody refers to adults.
To be honest, I'm not sure I know the answer to that, but as I say, the advice that I've been given is that the targets are clearly precautionary, and they are there to protect everybody, including children and people who have breathing difficulties and those sort of things.
I have to say, it's just incredible.
Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I believe any increase in air quality is negative impact on air quality is got to be taken pretty seriously. But my question was, you mentioned that there will not be wet waste. Is that correct? So it will be all recycling waste that will go there. It will be all recycling. And the second one is, you mentioned that the external container will be sealed. Does that mean they will be always sealed? If it is always sealed, then how they will be used? And the last one would be, what is the, if I couldn't spot that, what is the size of the site? If you would just kindly tell us.
I can answer the first 2 points. I'll have to check on the third point and perhaps come back to you on the size of the site. But the intention is not to handle large quantities of organic waste, but there may be organic waste being handled on the site. So we're not saying that there will be no organic waste handled on the site. Again, the intention is that the sorting and the stuff that's going to have an impact is going to be done within the building. So presumably the lorries will arrive, they will tip into the building, it will be sorted and taken away from the building. As I say, they've stated that anything that's stored externally will be in sealed containers until it's moved to the building to sort. But there will be a point, obviously, where you have to open the containers to unload into the building. But that will be the only sort of interaction in that respect. I think it's in the report, but perhaps if I can come back to you on the size issue.
Yeah, I didn't spot it, but the last one I just wanted to say is that some of us might have, well, I've been to this kind of Westfield site, and the smell is quite often, those people who work there, credit to them, you know, but sometimes if you are suddenly going there, it's quite a lot to take. And for those young children, very, very young children, don't we think that it will be quite a big impact on them every morning, and they're leaving the school and every afternoon?
Yes, I mean the issue on odour is as I explained, it is to a degree subjective, and it's largely controlled through the Environment Agency permit. So it would be for the Environment Agency to ensure that the odour is acceptable, but it's not something that I can tell you now that it's not something where I can say it won't impact on the children. What I can say is that they've taken measures to mitigate it, and it will be subject to control through the Environment Agency.
Yeah, and it's not for 1 day or 1 week or 1 month. It will be for several, decade and decade for this school. These children will have to go through. Anyway, that's it for me.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Khan, would you put your hand down, or did you want?
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I just wondered if you've got any other questions. No other questions. We move on to discussion then. Maybe I could just open a couple of comments from more experience of this than I would like, perhaps from my own ward. One is that I think it's very, very important to respect the waste industry. The sector is very, very much part of tackling our environmental crises, and any characterization of the industry as being somehow, perhaps as it was 50 years ago, is to miss the changes that have happened and the professionalism of that sector now and its importance. And I also accept the officers' thinking on pollution levels. I'm not convinced that this is going to create a great deal extra NOx or particulates at that distance. Where I am concerned, I was concerned and continue to be concerned, really, is that gap between us in planning and the Environment Agency, which is perhaps where I've had my own personal struggles there, is that when you sign something off on the condition that the Environment Agency will then pick up the odour and vermin issues, that requires a belief that they have the capacity and the resources to do it. And that's just a gap that it's quite perhaps personally difficult for me to cross at the moment. And if it wasn't so close to a school, I perhaps would be more confident about that. But I'm still feeling a little bit the way I was last time about this. Paul, comments from you? Your hand is up.
Thanks, Don. Let me just take my hand down. Yeah, I mean, look, let's be honest about this. If this was next door to the Bristol Montessori or a private school in Clifton, we wouldn't even be discussing this. There wouldn't be an application in front of us. And I think the children of Lawrence Hill deserve the same consideration as any other. In fact, probably more consideration, considering the environment in which they live. There will be more traffic, there will be more noise, there will be more odour, there will be more vermin. I can't in good conscience in any way support this.
Thank you. Ollie?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to support what Paul just said, but I mean, it looks to me and sounds to me like the company, the applicant, actually could be very, very good at what they do and take very great care in trying not to have a negative impact on people nearby. So I actually think we're lucky in the sense that we're having a good applicant putting this forward. But then on the other hand, it's that sort of what concerns me is the additional impact on top of what's already there. So we already know that the air quality is so bad that the children are having breathing issues, that lots of children are having to go to because we've had so many applications from this area over the last few years. And we've heard from parents from the nursery school about the times they have to take their children to the hospital to get their lungs checked out, and the number of other children from the area who are there being treated at the same time. And having had asthma myself, particularly when I was a child, it's not so bad nowadays. I mostly get away with it. But I know that when you're a kid, it doesn't take a lot, particularly if you're already a bit wheezy from existing gunk in the air. It doesn't take a lot to trigger things off and cause you to have an asthma attack or to make you very poorly. And so I have to say, I think if I have to take a sort of weigh up which could go wrong, children's health or us losing an appeal, I personally would be more prepared to lose an appeal than take a gamble with children's health. So I will be opposing this application.
Thank you. I think Fabian, then Fee, and perhaps we can move on then to.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I share the unhappiness of the last two speakers. Unusually for applications where acceptance approval is recommended, two reasons for refusal have been suggested. One is on page 123 and one is on 124. One concerns the odour and one concerns the vermin and the flies. I think, in all conscience, I think Paul's point is absolutely spot on. If this was in a area like Clifton, it wouldn't even get here. And we do need to, treat all children, whether they're from a rich area or a poor area, with the same regard to their well-being in the decisions we make and the impact on them. And I, in all conscience, can't support this. And I think we should use the reasons for refusal that are already been drafted in this report as our reasons for refusal. Thank you.
Thanks. Fee and then Steve, I think.
I think we can all see which way this one's going. I appreciate the point about if this was in Clifton, it wouldn't happen, but that's not because of some ghastly conspiracy. It's because land in Clifton's too expensive to put a waste station in.
It's policies as well. It's our policies as well, actually, to be fair to
there is that as well. But
the applicant.
If you don't mind, I mean, I do have I've got every sympathy. Yeah, there's also the land allocation. I do have every sympathy with Lewis, because Lewis is compelled to follow the advice of the experts who are used by the planning department as evidence in his report. So he didn't have a great deal of choice of what to do with this, really. So once again, bit of a stinker, Lewis. Bad luck. And you have to go by the book. And we wouldn't want you not to go by the book, because your job is to look at policy and say, is this applied or not? So I'm not. I've got every respect for the work you put into this one. That said, it is just so counterintuitive to think that in an area which has already got some of the worst air pollution levels in the city, which as far, Mark doesn't need me to lecture about how bad air pollution is in Lawrence Hill. It's bloody awful. So anything that could make it worse, I just don't think we can risk. So I'll be voting against this.
Thank you, Steve, and then Khan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think Paul put it very well right at the start. I think we were unanimous last time round, actually, that we were minded to reject this. We asked Lewis to draft some reasons, which he's done, and echo Fee's comments there. Thank you for doing that, Lewis. And it's been a difficult. I think we should reject it on the grounds that Lewis has drafted for us.
Thank you, Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. I think I shared the same opinion with the colleagues. And lastly, what I would say is I really do have respect for small businesses and family businesses. But in this case, I can't take, some other colleague says, I can't gamble with children's life. I don't want my children to be in that position every morning and every afternoon. So that goes with other children in our city. Thank you, Chair. I will be opposing this application.
Thank you. We have no further comments. Could people take down their hands if they, Steve, your hand, great, Thank you very much. So officer's recommendation is for approval. Would anyone like to move that? Marg, you'd like to approve?
I second it, Chair.
To approve the application. Marg, you're on.
No, not to approve the app. No, I won't. Sorry, I'll wait.
Okay, Khan, you would like to move the officer's recommendation to approve the application?
No, sorry, I was seconding Mark's proposal, but anyway.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone wish to move the? Yes. Does anyone wish to move the officer's recommendation to approve? I don't see it. Okay. In that case, can I move that we go to a refusal, which seems to be what the meeting is minded to do, on the grounds of those areas perhaps that are not so quantifiable. I myself I don't feel there's going to be a problem with pollution, strictly speaking, because pollution is NOx, pollution is particulate, and I don't think that's provable that there's going to be a problem. But I do have considerable doubts over the areas of vermin, flies particularly, and odour. And I put that to the meeting. And would anyone feel happy to second? Mark?
I'll second.
Mark's just seconded that. Thank you. Okay, so the proposal now is to refuse on the grounds of concern that this will cause problems with vermin and with odour. I propose, Mark seconds. I'm going to go around the meeting and ask for, against and abstain as I see you on the screen. Councillor Hants.
For.
Councillor Mead.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Breckles.
For.
Councillor Goggin.
For.
Councillor Hickman.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Khan.
For.
And myself for, as I proposed it. Thank you. So that is unanimous. We move on now to Glenfrome Road. And we have 3 public forum statements. First person I have on my list is Fergus Sykes. Mr. Sykes, are you here?
He's just coming in now.
Hello, Mr. Sykes. You have 1 minute, please.
Good afternoon, councillors. My name is Fergus Sykes and I'm the applicant's planning consultant. In January, officers refused our previous application on this site. They considered that 2 semi-detached homes cover too much of a site and clash with the existing 1930s terrace homes. As a result, the applicant redesigned the scheme, which now simply proposes to add 2 new identical terrace homes onto the existing terrace row. They would be built in the extremely long side garden of what is currently the end terrace, still leaving a 50-foot garden planted with hedges and 3 new trees. Both homes would have off-street parking. Your transport officers confirmed that there are no safety issues at the adjacent junction. This is a highly sustainable location, 100 metres from the nearest bus stop, and a few minutes walk from shops, a school and a park. It is therefore hoped that you will support our proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Kirk. I think Councillor Kirk is just connecting.
She's had some difficulties connecting, I think, the Zoom link.
Yes. Is Matthew Pearson there? And we'll come back to Councillor Kirk.
Yep, I'll admit him now.
Thank you. Oh, Jill, you're here, but you're muted.
Hello, can you hear me all right, Chair?
I can. we'll take Councillor Kirk's statement now, and then I'll move on to Mr. Pearson. Over to you, Jill.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair, and hello, councillors. My name's Jill Kirk, local councillor for Lockleys. Our role as ward councillors is to ensure a fair debate where there's any controversial local development plans. And if we think it necessary, we'll refer to Planning Committee for extra scrutiny and democratic assessment of all views presented. A previous submission by the applicants to develop homes on this garden site was rejected, and the applicants have now resubmitted new designs with a number of significant amendments. Based on these new designs, we requested a committee decision in event of refusal. The application has in fact now been recommended by officers for approval, but as councillors, we have upheld the request for a committee hearing to be absolutely sure that all voices are heard, particularly our residents. I personally recognise that the applicants have made significant amendments to their original designs in order to reduce the scale and impact of this small development and to address the objections previously made by planning officers. The new plans are more in keeping with the existing housing in the street and have included off-road parking. Whilst withdrawing my personal objections, I must qualify any support given with the need to consider potential impact on existing residents. And I must add, it was not my intention to appear in the developer's literature. I was actually unaware of that. We've continued to see and hear a range of comments both for and against the plans, and we are aware that some residents still have concerns about the development, including the impact on street parking locally and the potential disruption of the construction process. Therefore, I hope the committee will give full consideration to the range of views on this application and assess any potential impact on residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jill. I'm sure all councillors have sympathy with your concerns about appearing in developers' literature unannounced, and we would all be as annoyed as you are about that. Thank you. Matthew Pearson, Mr. Matthew Pearson. I think you're muted, Mr. Pearson.
Good afternoon, councillors.
Good afternoon. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. My name is Matthew Pearson, and I own a house around the corner from this site. And as a councillor just said, there's a lot of views on this site, and I just wanted to offer some support for the application. You know, I think small sites like this are vital to the housing supply. This is a really good, sustainable location. There's a bus stop on the doorstep. There's a huge Tesco's up the hill. You know, we're over towards. There's great parks. There's good secondary schools and plenty of green space in the surrounds. Do understand the frustrations about parking, but this has got off-road spaces, and you know, I really think that the people using this house and living in these locations are actually, you know, much less car users than they used to be. I think car usage is going down, and you know, I think these are concerns that will always happen on any development. In my opinion, the design fits in perfectly in the street scene, and I can't see any reason why the application should be refused. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. That brings us to the end of the public forum, and so we welcome Tom to do our presentation.
Hello, thank you.
Hello there. Over to you, Tom. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, hopefully that's coming through.
Yes.
Okay, so this application is for 2 new houses alongside associated amenity space, landscaping, car parking, bin and bike storage. The application site is located in northeast Bristol in Eastville, within the Lockleys ward. The application site is roughly triangular in shape and located on the corner of Glenfrome Road to the north and Ingmai Road to the south. Currently it's in use as private garden space belonging to the end of terrace property, 170 Glenfrome Road there highlighted with the blue line. as you've already heard, a previous application to develop this site with 2 houses was refused under delegated powers in January. Since this time, the applicant has worked closely with the planning authority to address the previous concerns and reasons for refusal, and the application that comes towards to committee today is the sort of end product of those discussions. So this is an aerial view of the site facing north, showing the surrounding context. So it's a primarily residential area, 2-storey terrace properties. There are also some semi-detached pairs in the vicinity. So this is the same view from street level, showing the wider site and the extent of the garden. And this is an aerial view from the other side facing south. Again, just showing a bit more of the wider context there. And again, this is the same view from street level. The application property number 170 is shown on the left there. And this final view is a view of the application site from the junction. So this is the site in the middle, and Glenfrome Road to the left, and Ingmar Road at the rear to the south. So the application site is highly visible from a number of vantage points in the local area. Overall, it's considered that the spacious nature of the corner plot contributes positively towards the character and appearance of the area. So that is a sort of key characteristic that needs to be preserved as part of any application. So this is the proposed site layout plan. As already mentioned, 2 new houses constructed to the end of the existing end of terrace property. They will be 2 stories in height and of a scale and design to appear as a continuation of the existing terrace. They'll be set back from the pavement to the front, side and at the rear to retain that spacious nature of the corner plot. And each property will have its own off-street parking space accessed from the rear via Ingmar Road. So this is the proposed elevation and floor plans of the first property, which will be a 2-bedroom dwelling. And this is the same for the new end of terrace property, which will be a 3-bed dwelling. So this final plan is an existing and proposed street scene, showing the new houses in the context of the wider terrace. In design terms, it's considered that the dwellings will appear in keeping with the townscape and surrounding properties. Back to the proposed layout plan. As already mentioned, the development will retain a sufficient amount of garden space to the side, which will maintain that sort of spacious and open character of the corner plot. A detailed landscaping plan has also been submitted, and compliance with this will be secured by condition. In terms of comments on the application, objections have been received from 24 neighbouring properties. To briefly run through these, they are mainly in relation to the sort of principle of development and whether or not the loss of garden space for housing is acceptable in principle. Also concerns regarding the loss of green space and landscaping, the reduction in car parking spaces for existing residents, and the impact of the new properties, how they would impact on the local parking provision in the area. Also, concerns have been raised regarding reduced visibility at the junction, and there have also been concerns regarding noise, light pollution, issues regarding drainage and overlooking. Alongside these, 6 letters of support have also been received, and also a letter of support from Councillor Kirk, who you've already heard from. So, touching on the main areas of objection, the application site is in a sustainable area where higher densities of residential development are considered appropriate in planning policy terms in principle, alongside the development of private gardens subject to adequate design. The loss of greenery and garden space is a valid concern. However, as previously mentioned, we have worked with the applicant over the past few months to address this issue and to ensure that an adequate amount of garden space will be retained at the site to maintain that character and appearance of the corner plot. The Council's Transport Development Management team have reviewed the proposal and confirmed that it is acceptable from the highways perspective, so subject to conditions. Overall, it's considered that 2 new dwellings, one with 2 bedrooms, one with 3 bedrooms, won't significantly increase the amount of cars that will need to be parked in the local vicinity. This won't have an impact on local parking provision, especially given that both properties will have a dedicated off-street parking space. The objections related to highway safety, they are acknowledged, and that has been looked at closely by the Council's highways team. They have confirmed that the junction itself isn't considered to be particularly dangerous, and the siting and scale of development being set back from that junction will allow there to be sufficient intervisibility between road users. So there are no concerns regarding highway safety in that respect. So for this reason and the reasons set out fully in the report, the application is considered acceptable and is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Councillor questions. Could you please raise your virtual hand if you have? Looking quiet. It's okay. You must. Tom's presentation must have been so exceptionally clear that, in fact, nothing needs clarification. In that case, I will move directly to the discussion. If you would like to contribute to the discussion, please raise. Fee, your hand went up first.
This does seem to be now a fairly uncontentious application. There were problems with the previous ones, and I can understand why Jill's maintained her right to bring it to our committee, but I have no problem with accepting this one myself.
Thank you. Fabian, Ollie, and then Khan, according to my list.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, if these had been built when the rest of the houses were built in the 1930s, we wouldn't give it a second thought. I mean, they're fitting well with the existing surroundings. They still leave a decent corner plot that's open. We need the housing, and we need houses rather than just flats. So I see no reasonable grounds for rejecting it. So I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. Next on my list is Ollie.
Thank you, Chair. It feels a bit odd that this is my last planning meeting and my last planning application to assess, and it's such a complex and controversial one. The building of 2 houses that blend in beautifully with the existing houses, and that they'll provide excellent quality accommodation for local people. So I'm very happy that I'm getting to vote for something quite nice. So I'll be supporting this.
Thank you. Brief as ever, Ollie. That's great. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it's not too far off. I mean, I travel this way quite often, and I don't see any reasons why we should oppose this at the moment. I don't know. Of course, I know. I mean, according to the record previously, but yeah, I see all good at the moment, and according to Ollie Mead as well, it's his last meeting, and I suppose for our as well for this municipal year, and let's do it a kind of a nice decision on this.
Thank you. Any further comments? Would anyone like to propose the officer recommendation?
Happy to do so, Chair.
Okay. Was that for you, Fabian, shouted out? I didn't see a hand, I'm sorry.
Yes, it was. Sorry, Chair.
Okay, Fabian. Then Mark.
Councillor Mark. Yeah.
Who seconded? Who wants to second? Okay, Councillor Smith.
So many seconds. So many.
Okay, we've got Fabian and again Councillor Smith the second. Officer recommendation 2, which is to approve. I will go around you as I see you on the screen. Please answer for, against, or abstain clearly, so that those viewing this meeting can see. Councillor Hunts.
For.
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Breckles.
For.
Councillor Goggin.
For.
Councillor Hickman.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Khan.
For, Chair.
Councillor Mead.
For.
And myself for. So the application is unanimously approved. Thank you everyone for your service this year. Some of you we will see again here and some not for a variety of different reasons. But I wish you all well and thank you for all you have done as members, but also particularly I think we should thank officers, planning officers, and also democratic services and IT, and all who've contributed to our work during this year, and especially perhaps Gary, who has been our ongoing companion and, let's be honest, guide in this. Thank you very much, and have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. The hard work gets done by the case officers, I assure you. Thank you anyway.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.